Thank you, Stephanie. Everyone's here, and it's not snowing, so we can let's call the meeting to order. It's November 21st, 2022. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for joining us today. We do have citizen input. I think we do have one letter, a phone message regarding unhappy with the law enforcement relation to Measure 114. And then we have another citizen input from, I believe, maybe the same person, and they want to know when and where they can buy psilocybin. So thank you for those messages. Do we have anything else? Brenda, there's nothing up there? Okay.
I'd just like to make a comment before we move on to the next thing, if there's no more public comment.
Stephanie, do we have anybody with a raised hand on Zoom? Thank you.
Okay. Well, I wanted to congratulate my fellow commissioners on their election wins. There was over 53,000 and 54,000 voters, respectively, who chose you and your policy perspectives to represent them on the Board of Commissioners. And I want to say that I respect and appreciate that, and will do my best to make sure that all of our policy perspectives are working together to solve the problems that the community wants us to solve. I will also ask my fellow commissioners to remember that in 2020, 63,000 people chose me and my policy perspectives to represent them. And I hope that we can make all of those perspectives work together to address the real issues facing our community.
Well, thank you for those numbers, Commissioner Chang. I haven't been certified yet. I think that's December 5th. So, okay, we're still going ahead. Consent agenda. Do we have?
Move approval of consent agenda.
Second?
Any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So thank you for that. The first thing we have on our agenda is something very special. And we're doing it first because it should be first. So we have a plaque to present for 10 years of amazing service with deep appreciation for your invaluable contribution and dedicated service to Deschutes County while serving as a member on the Deschutes County Public Health Advisory Board, Charlotte DeHate, and it's presented by the Board of Commissioners, signed by us. Oh my gosh, with our signatures on it. Oh, you're going to frame it. This is going to go up on the wall.
Hopefully you got room for it.
I know. I'm thinking like, well, maybe when people walk in the door or something. Anyhow, we would love to present this to you, and if you can come up, and then we'll take some pictures maybe, if somebody has
Yes,
it.
photo opportunities.
Before we get to the presentation, if I could just make a couple of comments as the commissioner who liaisons to the Public Health Advisory Board. I asked some of the members of the Public Health Advisory Board to share with me some of the highlights of Charlotte's service with the Public Health Advisory Board. So Charlotte has been a member of the Public Health Advisory Board for 10 years, starting in November 2022, which makes her, at the moment that she's exiting the Public Health Advisory Board, the longest serving member of the group. And during the time that Charlotte has served on the Public Health Advisory Board, she has done some amazing things. She has provided primary care service for the Oregon Health Plan population, expertise and insight to all of the other members of the Public Health Advisory Board. She has done wonderful things in terms of helping to expand our school-based health centers and, very importantly, access to reproductive health for our students at those school-based health centers. And just a number of people from the FAB just commented that Charlotte's warmth and compassion and kind of approachability meant a tremendous amount to them as members of the FAB, and it made the group so much better. And most importantly, you know, that approachability and warmth, and then the knowledge that and expertise and insight that Charlotte has shared with that group has allowed it to be as good of a functioning group as it could be. So thank you for all of those things in making the FAB a great group over this last 10 years.
Well, I was going to say some words afterwards, but now that we're on a roll. So yeah, Charlotte and I have worked together in many aspects in our small town of La Pine, in fact. So the La Pine Community Clinic, Sun River La Pine Economic Development. So looking at the big picture of the community also, how does this healthcare service fit into the community, and what else can we be doing around it? And I know I met Courtney back when we were talking, so counselor in the city of La Pine. The ambulance run issues. I mean, lots of different aspects of the community that we've been through over the years. And my wife has had a relationship with you also in the community as a small business owner and different things. So, and we just attended a retirement party for you also. So congratulations, another bit of recognition for you from the Board of Commissioners and all you've done here in Deschutes County and Southern Deschutes County specifically also. Thank you. Yes.
Is there anything you would like to say?
And then we'll take a photo.
Yes.
If you've
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the three of you very much. You are all very supportive of both me and the team that we have at La Pine Community Health Center and of the La Pine community, and so I appreciate all three of you and everything that you've done. The time on FAB was fun and amazing. I think we've accomplished some amazing things through that group, and I will miss all of this, but you're in great hands with Aaron Trapp and the team that is there now at this time. And Erin Gage Fitzpatrick, who is the Director of Quality at La Pine Community Health Center, is going to be on the FAB as long as she and they agree. And but she would be a great asset to that team. So there will still be representation not only from La Pine but from the Community Health Center on that group if that all comes to fruition. So thank you very much for everything that you have given me and given La Pine Community Health Center. It's truly appreciated.
Well, you think about what's happened in other healthcare situations in our country, and I look at what you've done in La Pine, and you are the shining star. So thank you for, being there and making healthcare more accessible to the south end of our county and to Christmas Valley, Gilchrist, the whole region. It's so important to be there available for people, and that's what your mission has been. So thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Now it's time for a photo.
Yes. Whoa, this looks pretty nice. Tom, did you order this?
Yes, I did request it.
Do you want to be in the picture too, Tom? Would you like to?
I'd love to.
Sure.
Yeah. Also, our Dave Huntley, our Public Health Advisory Board Chair, is here.
Please.
We also have some of our colleagues from La Pine Community Health Center.
I think the cameras can do a wide enough angle, maybe.
All right.
Please come up and join us. Yeah, Nick can take a photo. Courtney, get in here.
I think I want to just do the four of you first, and
Yes.
then
Yes.
I will
Yeah, get one with
absolutely.
four first.
Phone didn't quite want to cooperate.
And I can text you whatever photos you'd like, or email, or whatever, however you'd like to.
Okay, everybody, come on up.
There you go.
Where do we go?
Spread it out here.
This is great. Okay, 1, 2, 3. I'll take a couple of them here. Perfect, we've got them. Do you want me to share them with you? Would you like to?
Okay. Yeah.
Consent.
Oh, okay, for the hearing. Okay, all right. Okay, we have item number 10 of an additional FTE within health services.
Thank you. Hi, Commissioners. Jessica Jacks, Prevention and Health Promotion Program Manager. I am here to seek your approval for 1 FTE, regular Community Health Specialist Level 2. This position would specifically be focused on problem gambling prevention as well as outreach and referral services, which we've not ever been able to do. So the reason that we're seeking this additional FTE is twofold. We have a need as well as we have some revenue that can help support that need. The need, as we are aware of data that indicates that amongst Oregon adults, we have about 9% that are diagnosed with a gaming disorder. So that equates to about 14,000, a little over 14,000 Deschutes County adults. We know that our rates have increased as a result of COVID. And we know that problem gambling or having a gaming addiction is highly associated with substance use disorder, suicide, and mental health issues. So we know it's best for our health and our society when we don't have addiction, and so we are eager to apply these dollars toward prevention and outreach and referral. I mentioned that we have additional revenue. We have historically in Deschutes County had about $30,000. The money comes from Oregon Health Authority. The Oregon Health Authority receives about 1% of lottery dollars to support prevention and treatment across the state. And in recent years, they have been switching their allocation methods, and that has allowed us to receive a lot more money than we have ever been able to have. So we are moving from a 0.4 FTE to 0.6 with prevention, and then 0.4 with outreach and referral. These are two different funding service elements. One is recurring. The other we will have to apply for annually. What we will do with those dollars are a myriad of things. On the prevention side, very focused on prevention, education, and awareness, and policy, system, and environmental change. We have a strong effort on that side to do some more integration with our suicide prevention program, as we know that these risk factors cluster together, and we think we can be effective, more effective with our suicide prevention efforts if we're integrating these two programs. In the outreach and referral side of things, which it has some similarity to prevention, but is differentiated in that it's really about client finding, so being more active in populations of higher risk, going into those environments and ensuring that there are referral pathways. So that's the new area that we will be developing and implementing, and our focus will be this coming year on veterans, so that we are really ensuring that that population has a referral pathway should they need those services. I am here today because I'm hoping to get a jump start on the hiring process, even though the IGA won't come through until December. And this particular funding, it runs on the calendar year, so it's the 2023 calendar year as opposed to the county fiscal year. Curious to know what questions you have.
So does this include, probably not, people that play video games on their computer that are addicted to that?
Yes, it does.
It does? Okay.
They call that gaming screen addiction.
Gaming screen, okay.
I was going to ask the same question because you had used the word gaming a little earlier in your presentation, and is reaching screen gaming people, do you reach them in similar ways to people who have gambling, problematic gambling behavior, or different kinds of channels?
Yeah, there are. You're asking a great question. Essentially, we need to determine the appropriate pathway. So if it's screening and a person is at home, then we're likely not going into their home, but perhaps interacting with them in an environment that they would be. So so that could, depending on the population, could look a lot of different ways. But it's in part why we're exploring this with the veterans population first. We're going to learn some things. We hope to do this really well, and then not leave the veterans population, but add on to that. So think older adults, unique populations that we can learn more about those locations and the ways that we can interact and interface with them to get services that they need.
Great, thanks.
When you're referring to screen gaming, is that for money or not? Because I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
not always money, or?
Right. So it doesn't always have to be money. So, but it's often largely associated with dollar loss. But really, I have the definitions here. There are 4 definitions. I'm not going to read them all. But gambling in general is risking something of value. So if you think about something of value to an adolescent versus an adult, I mean, those concepts could be very different. So in adolescence, we might be looking at loss of a hoodie, something that's,
Gaming, yep.
yeah.
Well, I just, kind of brings back the memory. There were some of the phone games that's like, now you got to buy $15 worth of coins or whatever, and that's, you don't know it, but you're kind of giving money away. I mean, hopefully you know it, but I mean, there's some interesting situations out there.
Yes, and I would have to say it's an area that we have been really eager to learn more about, have been concerned about, as we see those types of games kind of priming that adolescent brain that's still developing, and learning those patterns that are highly associated, even if it's in a game situation, start teaching that brain that addiction type of behavior. So that's where we're hoping to get deeper and stronger.
When I worry that, the state is at, and this isn't for you, but the state is at odds with itself for some of the video lounges that are promoted, and the legislative appetite for wanting revenue from those sources, which promotes it. So I think, we've got a big loop that we push on one side and maybe pull on the other, which is a real shame.
Does seem that way, doesn't it? What is it? We have the second most addicted population in the nation per capita.
Well, and then for the legislative, bonding against future lottery revenues is always something that really I just don't support. And these are some of the Connect Oregon dollars I'm sharing with my fellow commissioners. I mean, there's money sometimes that we're spending that is borrowed against future lottery dollars. So that's even worse, compounding the problem. But that's not for you at this point, yeah.
And there's lottery dollars that we're spending that are not borrowed against future lottery revenues, but are from this year's revenues that we put into economic development and natural resource stewardship and schools and all sorts of things that I wish were not tied. I personally wish were not tied to the lottery either. Yeah. But if there's no further questions or discussion on this item, I would.
Well, so just one question. So I'm looking at, so 1 FTE is what we're adding?
Correct.
So explain let's start at the beginning again from the FTE point of view. So, because you mentioned 0.4 to 0.6 something, but.
Right.
Yeah.
So we historically have had about 0.2 FTE, and that's been tagged on to another position. Where currently this year we have 0.4. The total increase would be to 1.0. So we're asking for a full FTE because the position that the current FTE is associated with is a level 3, and we want to maintain that position as a level 3 substance misuse prevention coordinator. We've always had to think creatively in prevention as we braid funding streams. So we are asking for, it's not an additional, it's an additional 1 FTE, but it won't be in addition to the 0.4. That makes sense.
So instead of piecing it together, you'll have the full FTE, and then the commitment is to have that full FTE funded into the future.
Yes, and I did ask the state their, kind of perspective on the revenue. In the last 5 years, they've seen those revenues be very steady and actually with a slight increase. Unfortunately, that means gambling is thriving, and hopefully that's not problem gambling. There is a difference between gambling and problem gambling.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move approval of resolution number 2022-073 to add 1.0 regular FTE Community Health Specialist 2 position within the Health Services Fund effective January 1st, 2023.
And I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
One thought is maybe for Nick, just to kind of review the big picture about, we're adding positions once in a while, mid-budget. So I guess we'll be doing that at the mid-year budget meeting here coming up in a few weeks. But, these come off, we talk about the specific topic, and we want to, support this effort. But, yeah, growing FTE in the organization and the stability of it, that'll be our budget analysis discussion. Just my...
So actually, what does this, it's the estimated cost is $158,000. Jessica, how do you back in out of the benefits? So what is the actual pay?
First of all, clarification, that actually is a typo. It should be 150, not 158. And
That should be 115?
150, not 158.
150, 523?
150, sorry.
It says 158,523
Is what it says
on
on
the
the
budget impacts.
Yeah, that's
So should we 150,000 or?
150037, I
Yeah.
think.
She wants to know the numbers.
Number.
Well,
Yeah, I'd have to call on my virtual
Cheryl's looking it up real quick back there.
back there. And so, I'm sorry, your specific question was?
my question was, what is the gross of the salary for this position? Because it says the cost, which includes benefits, is $158,000 on this report. So I was just curious what the position paid, because it's a Community Health Specialist 2 that you're,
So I can, while Cheryl's looking, to find hopefully an answer to your question, because I do not have the breakdown of benefits there. I can share that I anticipate this position being very intriguing and having internal candidates apply. So I, with this amount, looked at our most senior candidate that could potentially be in this position. So it is a higher amount because of that.
So it's like you set it at a higher, you assumed a higher step
I assume.
within, okay, got it.
Okay. All right. So let's see.
We
Commission.
could, probably, I'm guessing that either Cheryl or Robert could
Here comes Cheryl.
give us a gross estimate of, if we're talking about $150,000, what the ratios are of benefits to salary within that. If not a specific number, just kind of like a.
Sure. Cheryl Smallman, Business Officer for Health Services. I estimate that it would be $95,014 for the salary specifically for this one.
Thank you, Cheryl. Glad you were in the room. Thanks for being available. All right. So Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you very much,
you.
Jessica. And we have the next item, and it looks like maybe Cheryl again. No.
My committee is Ann Kilty for Public Health Clinical Services Manager.
And hi, I'm Christine Pagano. I am a Health Services Supervisor for the WIC program.
All right, so we're here today requesting authorization to apply for a grant through COHC with the purpose of buying a van that we can use as a mobile outreach clinic for both the reproductive health clinic, WIC, and the perinatal care team. What we realized prior to COVID, but even more so during COVID, is that we need to be more flexible in how we see people. Not everybody can come into our brick and mortar clinics in Redmond and Bend and the services that are available in Lapine. And that people in outlying areas have a hard time reaching us. People in vulnerable populations have a hard time reaching us. And the barriers are distance, cost of fuel, childcare, work schedules, all those things that some people aren't challenged with, but a lot of the people that we're trying to target are challenged with. And the idea of this van would be to go out to those outlying areas on a scheduled basis so people would know when we were there and they could seek services, or to events with community partners, or to targeted areas, maybe still in the Bend and Redmond areas, where we know some of the populations we're trying to reach. And the reason that a mobile van would be helpful is that we could provide a confidential space for these services. We would be purchasing a unit that has bathroom facilities for collecting samples, and we could do almost all of our regular services in this van, which would really increase access and hopefully health outcomes.
So has Central Oregon, is there like a committee of Central Oregon Health Council that has come up with this idea, or is this just like, hey, we need to do this? I'm just wondering, where is it kind of evolving from?
Right, so there's an open grant that we
Yep.
are aware of, and we had been working on this for a few years, like having this idea and wondering where could we find the funding,
Yeah,
and not wanting to do county general funds for that, and so looking for an opportunity just like this to help us purchase the van.
So, and when you say van with a bathroom, it's probably going to be more like a motorhome.
So, no, it's more like a Sprinter. I've been searching, trying to find out, price range and the availability, and it's not like a glamorous big bathroom. It's like a small kind of camping situation, but it affords privacy and the ability to do all the services we would need to do.
And the COHC, like their open grant offering, what, I guess, what's eligible for that? Like, how broad is that? And what else might health services be interested in submitting for it, if not, besides this?
Right. Well, actually, the deadline for the application is today, so there really aren't any opportunities right now. There's a very short turnaround from notification to the final application. It goes up to $80,000, and there are no limitations that would restrict us from doing a van. It's based on kind of at-risk populations, increasing health equity and outcomes, and they felt like this proposal was really within what they were trying to do.
Right.
So what do the sprinters cost that you've looked?
So I found, I did a quick scan, I'm not in the van life, but I found one for $75,000, I found one for $69,900. So I think that we can find what we're looking for in a used vehicle. I don't think we need to, go big and get something new. But I think there are, apparently a lot of people bought them during COVID, and now there's a big turnaround on people who don't want them anymore.
Right. Yes, definitely. And the prices of used vehicles is going down now too because of inflation and how people are, in crisis situation regarding financial things.
Where
So,
would this vehicle be based out of?
Well, I'm not sure if it would be parked down here at Wall Street near my clinic or at Courtney or I guess potentially the new Redmond building. We haven't really gotten that far yet because we're waiting to see what you all thought. But then our plan was really to have a calendar so that people could count on when the vehicle would be there. I mean, it's not helpful to communities if we just show up and they don't know we're coming. So if we could have kind of a schedule that people could count on, in addition to some additional events that we might do, then either my team or Christine's team or our teams combined could go out and people could come and seek services.
I have a question. Will you guys cover Northern Klamath at all? Because Health Council does include that in their region. Like Gilchrist and things?
I mean, that's a good question, and I'm going to be really honest that when you guys were talking about Gilchrist and Christmas Valley earlier, I leaned over to Cheryl and I'm like, are those in Deschutes or Klamath County?
No,
So-
right.
Yeah, right.
Klamath.
So, I mean, those communities need a lot of services, and I mean, I think everything is on the table. We hadn't really, nailed down where we would go and when. Part of this is that we are not asking for additional FTE to cover these services, so we really need to be strategic about who we're sending out when and where the most need is.
I know Charlotte took me for a tour of North Klamath a couple years ago, so that's why I just popped in, that if there was the capacity, it's, there's always more need out there, and especially with gas prices being so high for people to try and, drive to Bend or whatever. Great. So, and you need to, by 5 o'clock is your deadline today?
Something like
Perfect timing, right? Any more questions?
You guys are so popular, it's hard to get into.
Wow.
I would,
Limited meetings all of a sudden.
I wouldn't go that far. Any other questions?
Nope.
Can someone make a motion then?
I'll move approval for request to apply support for this application of the Central Oregon Health Council grant in the amount of $80,000 to purchase and retrofit a mobile outreach van.
Second.
Further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, and that's great.
I guess one thing I would, this is not for today, but for future reference, a past decision to purchase a kind of more unique vehicle, like not a mobile van, but to carry a whole lot of supplies. I can't remember exactly where within health services that was, but it's kind of sticking in my head. I'm just wondering if we have an inventory of these unique vehicles that we have and an ability to make sure that everyone across health services knows that they're in our inventory so that, we can optimize.
Absolutely, and I did kind of consider what the options were, but none of them had exactly what we needed for clinical services.
The bathroom and everything, yeah. But, but this one will be added to that inventory of unique vehicles, and then hopefully, if everyone in health services is aware of them, then people could, if they have a special need one week, they could ask you to borrow it or something like that. Great.
Great. Thank you so much.
Happy holidays.
Yes. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you're not having to have a chicken. I hear a lot of people are having chickens. Okay, item number 12. Cody? There you are. Welcome, Cody.
Good afternoon.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. So, Board, the road department prepared bid solicitation documents for the Deschutes Market Road, Hamehook Road Canal Crossing project. This project includes extending and replacing an existing 36-inch COID canal pipe that crosses Deschutes Market Road in close proximity to the intersection with Hamehook Road, as well as some other utility relocation work that must occur prior to the 2023 irrigation season. This work's necessary to accommodate the planned roundabout project that road department will be constructing at the intersection of Deschutes Market Road and Hamehook Road. However, due to some delays with primarily the right-of-way acquisitions for that, for the bigger project there, that project, we're not going to be able to get that out to bid until the first of 2023, with construction anticipated to start in March of 23 for the roundabout project. So with that, we broke out this separate project to get the canal crossing work done outside of the irrigation season. 4 responsive bids were received by the road department on the advertised bid opening date of November 16th. Before you this morning is this afternoon is document number 2022-830, a notice of intent to award contract to the apparent low bidder, Knife River Corporation Northwest, in the amount of $197,489. Approval of this notice of intent to award would begin a 1-week protest period for interested parties to contest award of the contract. And if no protests were received during that time, the contract would be awarded administratively. Real quick, I was going to share my screen here, just so those in attendance can see. This is our concept map of the roundabout project. There in red is the canal pipe crossing that we're talking about with this contract notice of intent before you this morning. Construction work for the crossing work is anticipated to begin in mid-December and is anticipated to be completed by the end of February 2023. The current total estimated cost for the entire Deschutes Market Road, Hamehook Road roundabout project, including this canal crossing work, is $2.5 million. And I will turn it back over to the board, except one last thing, Chair, I'd ask if the board does approve this notice of intent today, if you could please sign that document right now so I can get that posted on our website here prior to 5 p.m. today. I know your guys' meeting agenda is anticipated to go well past that, I think. So.
Okay. Yeah, we may be taking a break to sign some things if we go up to 5 today. So one question, this is an open canal on both sides of the road?
That is correct. This is I believe it's the lateral canal owned, operated by COID.
So there's an existing pipe under the road now. This basically just kind of doubles the length of it is in preparation.
With the roundabout project, the roadway alignment is both widening and also shifting more towards the north. So we need to extend that crossing.
Good, understood. With that, I'll move chair signature of document number 2022-830, a notice of intent to award a contract for the Deschutes Market Road, Hamehook Road Canal Crossing Project.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So Cody, I'll get that signed. I'm sure Brenda will get it to me and get it over to you as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cody. All right, we're now at item number 13, legislative update.
Just use this one. You just use this one. You just pull the last sheet off of here and go ahead and sign.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon, Doug.
Hello,
Doug Riggs, on behalf of you.
Yes, our partner in the legislative process.
Right, happy to be here. I think Whitney was going to introduce me, but she's not here, so I can get started. I do have a PowerPoint. I think she's out making copies of it, but you might have a version of it. I will just say that an awful lot has occurred in the last few weeks, and the dust is beginning to settle on the elections. It took a little longer than usual because of the new rules as far as when ballots could be postmarked and still be counted. But I think we have a pretty good sense of the lay of the land. So I wanted to go over that with you and then talk a little bit about what next steps would be heading into the next session. So just real quickly, as you all know, we have a new governor, Governor Tina Kotek. I've known her for a long time. She was as I mentioned in the previous meeting, she was the lobbyist of the School-Based Health Alliance before I became the lobbyist of the School-Based Health Alliance. So we worked together on kids programs and issues like that for a number of years. The second thing I'd note, and we'll go into a little more detail on each of this, is that there are slimmer majorities in the House and Senate, so no more supermajorities, and that's a fairly significant thing. And then the last thing I'll say is the session will be here before you know it, even more quickly than usual. So let me just start with the governor's race. Tina Kotek won with about 47.1% of the vote, give or take a few percentage points or decimal points. The combination of Christine Drazen and Betsy Johnson received about 52.3% of the vote. So what that, I think from a practical standpoint, if I'm the incoming governor looking at that, what I say is I've got some homework to do to reach out to areas that did not support me. And if you look at a map, you can certainly see that there's an awful lot of red in the state. There were about 7 counties that were blue. So those are issues that she's going to have to pay attention to. The governor-elect has already had a press conference to indicate, what her main focus is going to be, and no surprise, it was certainly a concern of people who were voting in the election. Homelessness and housing is number one for her. Fits in very well with what she's worked on in the past, but clearly we have an awful lot of work to do on that issue. Her second priority has to do with expanding access to mental health and addiction treatment services, including gambling, which I noticed in one of your earlier segments. The two are related, and gambling addiction is much higher than most states in Oregon. So that's something I think that will be a focus. And then the third thing that she indicated in her press conferences was, as I mentioned, trying to bridge the divide between urban and rural Oregon on issues, et cetera. So we'll see. Last thing on this that I'll mention really quickly is they do have a transition team established. Tim Inman, who worked with her in the legislature, is going to be her director of transition services. He currently works for the University of Oregon. I won't hold that against him as a Beaver.
They won. They did win. Nick was there.
Yes, they did. I see Nick's got his duck tie on.
It's his birthday, too,
Right,
so
happy birthday.
he's celebrating.
See how Nick feels after Saturday.
There you go.
Oh, that is the big day, isn't it?
We'll see.
And where is that game going to be?
It's in Corvallis.
Oh,
I will be there.
Nick, are you going? I'm not. Oh, gosh, you need to get him tickets. He needs to
I'll
go.
text you updates, regular updates. Only if the Beavers are winning, though. So. I did, if you flip to the next slide that I've got in here, I did think Jim Moore, a political scientist who is at Pacific University, had a good comment, which is really the first task of the governor ought to be to try to say, hey, I'm the governor for the whole state. How do we sit down and work together, roll up our sleeves? So we'll see where that goes. From a legislative perspective, as I mentioned, there were supermajorities both in the House and the Senate. Both the supermajorities are not in place anymore in the Senate. The Senate went from 18 Democrats, 10 Republicans, and 2 independents. Coming into the next session, we expect it to be 17 Democrats, 12 Republicans, and 1 independent. 1 Republican who's been an independent is expected to come back into the Republican fold. The surprise race, I would say, in the Senate was in Salem. Raquel Moore Green, a Republican, was running to unseat a Democrat, Deb Patterson. All the polls had Raquel Moore Green either tied her up, and she ended up losing by about 7 points. So, we're continuing to see this trend of the polls not being accurate. One election cycle will be, one way, the next it'll be the other. But clearly the polling system is not accurately reflecting, which way the voters are going, and we saw that on a national basis as well. The House was 37 to 23, which is a supermajority plus one. It is currently expected to be 35-25, the key race over here was, of course, the North Bend, South Redmond seat that Emerson Levy looks like she's picked up. So supermajorities are eliminated in the House as well. Another big issue is who's going to run the place. And we've had Peter Courtney running the Senate since the beginning of time. He, is the longest-serving legislator, has been around for a long time, and he ran the Senate and really ran the state really very effectively. He kept the trains running on time for a lot of years. But clearly, with him leaving, they had to pick someone else. In the Senate, Democrats picked Rob Wagner, a Democrat from Lake Oswego, as the new Senate president. So that happened just this last weekend. So he's the new Senate president. If you turn to the next page, next steps, something that I outlined a little bit earlier in my meetings with you is just the sheer number of new legislators in Salem. I put 41 of 90 up at the top of this slide. That's the number of new legislators since the beginning of the 2023 session. So the last full session, or the beginning of the 2021 session, the last full long session was in 2021. And since that point in time, almost half of the seats are occupied by someone else. That's an awful lot of turnover. If you add up the number of people who've never served in a live, in-person legislative session, that number is over 50. So over 50% of the over 50, which is much more than 50% of the legislature has never had the public walking in the building, sitting in front of your office, sending you notes out, to get you off the floor, having to attend in-person hearings. And it's quite a different building in the traditional sense than it has been the last couple of years. So it'll be an adjustment. The last thing that I'll point out, which is really going to be very difficult to navigate, literally navigate, is that the fact of the matter is that the Capitol is under construction. They decided to delay the start of seismic construction in the building for more than a year, and as a result, all chaos has broken out in the building. I'll just list off the things that we don't have. We don't have a rotunda. We don't have a front or rear entry, so there are no steps. There are no steps in the rotunda going up the galleries. We don't have the lobbies off of the galleries, so there's no ability to watch what's going on from the lobbies. There's no basement at all. Basement is entirely closed off, which means there's no cafe, there's no coffee, there's no center section hearing rooms. The list goes on and on. There's no lobby message center, which of course for me is important. So we'll be a couple blocks away. So it's going to be I think it's going to be a very crowded building as the public comes in the building and tries to meet with people. You're going to find, all the chairs occupied in the House wings, in the Senate wings. It's going to be really a difficult session to navigate. So just a few issues that we see coming up, and I do want to note that now that the dust is settled on the election, we are in the process of working with staff to take the list of items that we talked about with the department heads, boil it down, prioritize it, get it to all of you, and then we'll know more on between December 5th and December 8th when they have legislative days. The committees will unveil all of their bills, and so we'll have a very good sense where committees are going. And so with that data point, I think we'll be able to come back to you the following week and say, here's the 30 issues that you raised, here's how it interfaces with what we expect committees to be doing, the new committees might be, and then give you a sheet so the three of you can begin to prioritize what are our top 3 to 5 issues, what are the issues we want to support, are there anything that we want to oppose. So we'll be ready to go in January. But overall issues, obviously, housing and homelessness, workforce, and that is across the gamut. Behavioral health, semiconductor, childcare, workforce, those are all key issues in Salem. Ballot measure 110 adjustments. I fully expect the House Behavioral Health and Health Care Committee to come across with some adjustments in the way that ballot measure 110 is operating right now. Public safety, there's a public defender crisis that'll be a front and center issue. There's money available to the state through the Federal CHIPS Act that just passed in Congress, and there'll be a big effort on that. And then, as I've mentioned before, and something that we continue to hear from a lot of legislators, is a frustration with the inability to get resources out to their community partners quickly, whether that be a county, it be a community action agency, it be a nonprofit, it be a city. But the long bureaucratic delays in getting funding out in the middle of a crisis, I think, is something that you'll see as a key topic. And then the last thing I just go through on the final page is key dates. I've threw a couple dates in here that are in the past, but I think they're important to mention. Last week, the revenue forecast was announced for November. That impacts all of you, obviously, because the state budget depends on it, and the revenue forecast was up again, which means that not only will there be a larger kicker this time, estimated to be $3.7 billion for the next biennium, retroactively for people who pay taxes at the end of this biennium, but it also means that there's more general fund money that will be available, and, as we talked about earlier in one of the discussions, more money coming into the lottery. So that's up. This last weekend, the Senate President was selected. In a week and a half, the House and Senate caucuses meet and they elect, the Senate caucus has already met, but the House caucuses will meet and elect their leadership. We expect it to be the same, Vicki Bruce Iverson and Dan Rayfield in the Republicans, Democrats. And then the snowball begins to go downhill, and it won't stop until next July. Legislative committee days come up on December 7th, 8th, and 9th. That'll be a key indicator of what we can expect for next session. The deadline to pre-session file bills is the 21st. There are reportedly 3,600 bills pre-session filed with Legislative Council already. If that's not a record, it's going to be close. Usually we see about that number total. So that's a lot of bills for us to go through. And then here's where it gets quick. January 9th is when they'll swear in new members, and on January 17th, which is fully 2 weeks earlier than usual, they will kick off the session. So typically in past sessions, since we've had this constitutional amendment allowing annual sessions short and long, the session has begun the first Monday in February with swearing in, and the second day in first Tuesday in February when they actually get to work. So fully 2 weeks ahead of time, they're going to get started, and that means a very limited window for preparation. And
But Doug, it's going to go as long, though?
it'll go the same 150 days, so it will end 2 weeks
it's-
earlier. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I think their goal really was to avoid these sessions where they went all the way up until 4th of July weekend, or the opportunity to go to 4th of July weekend. I remember the days back in 2003 and 2005. One year we went to August 28th, and they turned off the air conditioning in the building that summer. So, and it was a particularly warm summer, and being in that building when it was 85 degrees outside and probably 135 degrees inside was not pleasant. Another year they went to August 11th. A couple years they went to July 31st. That was no fun for anyone, especially those of us who had kids back then. So it was, I think the constitutional amendment to limit the number of days was good.
It's nice to have your budget before the first day of the fiscal year.
Exactly.
As well.
Yeah. So you go in there, and happy to take any questions. You might, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
To the board out of the gate. Thank you.
Doug, I was reading about that interview, that press event that the governor did, where she talked about housing and homelessness and behavioral health and addiction. And she said that she was going to do a tour in January. She was going to make a circuit around the state. Is there a way for us to advocate for her to make sure to stop and visit with us here on that tour?
Yeah, Commissioner Chang, I think that's a great idea, and be happy to work with staff to put something together for you guys to maybe send a letter inviting her. I am trying to meet with all of our local legislators as well, and that's something that I think would be good for me to ask them to put in a good word. I think it would make an awful lot of sense for her to come visit Deschutes County. Yeah.
Great.
We're going to get together on December 19th for a legislative, kind of a Central Oregon legislative lunch or something.
Commissioner, that's right. We are putting together a jointly hosted city, county, et cetera, kind of partners legislative update. We've moved it from just this last week, moved it from the 19th to the 16th. And the reason we decided to move it is because Speaker Dan Rayfield is going to be visiting Bryanville and Madras on Monday the 19th, and is going to take Vicki Iverson and a couple of our legislators away to that tour. So we've moved it to Friday the 16th. It'll be in Redmond from starting at 8:30, but really not starting until 9 to 1, and hope that you can all make it and participate. I think it's a real effort that a lot of us have been talking about to get the region united and figure out what are the key issues that we can agree on and take that jointly to Salem. With the growth of the region in the last 10 years, the opportunity for the region to speak with a real strong voice on issues of mutual impact are really important.
Is that the date, Brenda, that we were supposed to be at Sun River at 9? And I'm also supposed to be in Salem that morning at 8.
There's 3 places to be.
I'm like, okay, this is not going to work well, and you're telling.
Government Advisory Committee and that joint breakfast with the Sun River Service District.
Okay.
So, I mean, afternoon could work, but.
Okay, I'll talk with staff and see what we can work out.
Okay.
Well, then, so we have legislative ideas also, accessory dwelling units, disconnecting from the fire map. Commissioner Chang and I were both able to see Senator Gold at AOC, so that was really good to mention that to him. He hadn't even heard of that concept. We're like, oh no, it's a great idea. So we were able to both see him.
Yeah, and I wouldn't use the word disconnect. I would say, if we presume that all these areas that we know are going to be in high and extreme risk are going to be in high and extreme risk, and just let them proceed with fire resilient building materials and defensible space, then we don't need to wait for the maps.
Well, it was pointed out already that other parts of the state that may not make sense. I mean, if there's just a green lush area that doesn't have the same fire prone situation, so it's east and west, I guess, Cascade Mountains, east and west. It may not be the right solution for other parts of the state, so we can't really just go blanket up front. So however we can work that out.
I know that Jefferson County is not really enamored with the idea, and neither is our planning commission. So and yet we are 5,000 houses short in Deschutes County. So as a commissioner, I feel the pressure of that 5,000 shortage. It's quite huge. What kind of things are you thinking about, Doug, for Measure 110? Both Christine Drazen and Betsy Johnson said they would do a lot to get rid of it. So what are we looking at now to get rid of, to work on Measure 110 and the fact that it's like we have a sign on our state borders that say, welcome, come and do drugs?
Chair and members of the commission, I think that's a very good question. I think that the art of the possible is probably figuring a way to better incentivize people to encourage them to seek treatment. Right now, there really is no incentive or hammer to seek treatment, and so you get a fine, and the percentage of people who are seeking treatment based on that is almost nil. Varies by county, but most counties are under like 1%. So I think that AOC and the LOC and the mayors have talked about some way to really focus on those incentives. There probably are going to be a lot of discussions about how to get money out to programs more quickly. The funding that went out has been very clunky. The process was very clunky and took much more time than was probably necessary. And in the meantime, a number of substance abuse programs closed, waiting for funding. And so it was a real challenge. The interesting point to make is that both the Oregon Health Authority Director and the Behavioral Health Director at the Oregon Health Authority have just this last week announced their resignations, probably reading the handwriting on the wall that they expected to be replaced. And so, whoever is the new Oregon Health Authority Director and the new Behavioral Health Director, I would fully expect to be told by the governor it needs to be different. But it's, as far as throwing the entire measure out, I doubt that with the margins in the House and the Senate, that'll be something that will be considered. But I do think, and Rob Noakes, who's the chair of the House Health Committee, has already talked about what can we do to make the process work better to incentivize people to go to treatment. If they don't go to treatment, to hold them accountable. I think those are the types of changes that I would expect to be the most likely to succeed through the House and Senate and be signed by the governor.
We, just in the last 4 to 6 weeks, I've heard some interesting ideas from people that at the AOC conference last week. That this woman Amy, I can't remember exactly what her last name was, but I want to say Amy Ramsey, from one of the coastal communities, counties. She was talking about a need for something that we don't have just yet, which is not jail, but is not, but does provide us opportunities for an intervention in someone's kind of cycles of substance use, and essentially a place to hold them until their head clears out a little bit. And it was interesting because I'd heard the exact same thing from Judge Crutchley here in Deschutes County, who administered our family drug treatment court for a number of years. So that, they were both calling for something, because Crutchley said, look, you send somebody to jail, there's still substance use going on in jail. So that's not actually, not only is punishment not the right approach to someone who has addiction issues and needs treatment, but it's also not an effective place to clear their head out so they can actually make the right choices for themselves moving forward either. It's it sounds very expensive, setting up something that we don't have currently, but who knows? Maybe there are some very innovative people out there who can picture what this might look like and how it might connect with residential treatment facilities and things like that we're already working on building. So this idea of, it's all, I would use a word a little bit more aggressive than incentivizing people to go to treatment, but without saying, we should just go back to sending them to jail, because that clearly wasn't working either.
Commissioner, it's an interesting point, and I'll note that there's a model for that kind of program. The Mid-Willamette Valley in Salem has Bridgeway Recovery Services, which has the model both of a kind of an inpatient facility for people who have addictions issues, as well as the next step away from that kind of inpatient service, which is they have a house where people can live in a transitional period. And that's been proven to be fairly effective. It's a model that can be replicated. It's a model that has been defunded by the state over the years, but it is, they were one of the proposals that did get money funded, not until May or June of this last year. But in Marion Polk, EML County, I think, put that proposal in their recommendations, and they got funded for expansion of the existing program. But clearly there are a lack of services for anyone who's got a substance abuse or a gambling issue right now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Judge Crutchley really emphasized you need to break the cycle. You need to kind of, you really need an intervention. It's just that the interventions that we used to have were only marginally successful. So, no need to go back to interventions that don't work, but we should figure out what the interventions are that will work. And that sounds like a really interesting model to learn more about. It was called Bridgeway Recovery.
Yeah, I can send you some information about their program.
Commissioner Chang, you mentioned substance use still going on in jail. Is that a fact that you know?
Yeah.
So we can learn about that tomorrow if we have that here in Deschutes County. And then also, that's probably the most controlled environment. So to build another facility without a scanner and a police-controlled environment, I'm sure there'd be possibility of more use going on. Is So I'm just pointing out that you're asking for something that doesn't sound that it's logically feasible, is from what I'm seeing.
I guess I would disagree because a jail is there to hold people who have committed a vast array of types of crimes, while what we're talking about would be something that was purpose-built. And again, not to necessarily be, punitive to people, but to help them.
Well, yeah, and I'm just pointing out that to have drugs available in a situation like that is as probable or more probable than a jail. So I'm just pointing out that logic stream doesn't sound, yeah.
I would say that you talk to someone like Rick Trelevin from Best Care, and you just say like, hey, how much illegal drugs are pumping through your facility that you operate? I don't think that he would say that there was very much.
And so we'll ask the sheriff and the jail operations tomorrow. So that's interesting. Okay. Well, and as I say, so there's a different way to look at this. Giving the judges the tools they need. An officer in the street says, oh, this person's in a bad addiction cycle. I've seen them many times. Let's put them in the system. And if the system is a jail cell, that may be the most stable situations you could be in. And then giving the judge the ability to say, we're going to hold you for a few days. And I don't know all the legalities of this. I'm just as big dreaming. We're going to hold you for a few days till your head gets clear and we can get good clarity on this situation. I don't see the difference between that and another middle of the ground thing. So I'm just learning, just questioning.
Well, I know people that have to send their family to Los Angeles for drug treatment. And they go there, and how many times do you send them to treatment and you keep hoping that something's going to work? And then I have another friend whose brother was in prison for 4 times, and finally the 4th time he got off drugs. But, I think it's very unique. It's person to person, and we have an enormous problem in the state with our drug use. We are at the top, and it's not really. And then the number one problem we have now are the bodies that are dying, the people that are dying with the overdoses. So it's a really huge problem. And that's to quote a judge from Deschutes County, and then that's also to quote a Eugene city councilor saying that they've got overdoses dying in the streets. Now, we didn't see it when we were, around our hotel, and everything seemed really quite nice in Eugene last week, but I don't know.
Sure. I think it's a real challenge, and what I continue to hear every single place I go talking about these issues is workforce. And, it's a combination. We have the state, in the last downturn, 2008, 9, 10, 11, disinvested in behavioral health services and behavioral health rates and disinvested in community programs. And the reinvestment into those areas didn't start until 2018, 2019 maybe, and the money has taken way too long to come out. So it's a combination of a disinvestment, which, to save money, we're costing ourselves more money. Mm-hmm. It's the same in the kids system. To save a few $million with the Children and Families Commission, wiping that out, we're costing more money in all sorts of other services. Mm-hmm. So we would have been better off continuing the investments in community programs for kids, but we didn't do that. And then the second issue has been that in an additional opportunity for the legislature to save money, they held back on increasing rates for the remaining services that existed, which has created a workforce gap. And so now we've lost all this ground. We've lost a decade of development of the workforce, and we've got people retiring and getting out of the workforce. And so I think, the first issue I mentioned in that sheet, in that update, that slide was workforce, behavioral health workforce, health workforce. How do we get more qualified people who can, staff these facilities back into the system? Because right now, even if we had more money, we don't have anyone to serve them. So it's not going to be solved in a single session. It's going to be a multiple sessions that we're going to have to work on this. But I've told my friends who are legislators on the Ways and Means Committee, I hope that if we have another downturn, that we don't make the same mistake again. Mm. Because if we're disinvesting in the types of programs that prevent people from going to higher levels of care and into more expensive portals, then we're not saving any money. And that was really the mistake that the legislature made in especially the 09 and 11 session by wiping out funding for a lot of those programs that help people maintain themselves as healthy members of communities and families, et cetera. So.
Great. Well, so this is kind of a formal setting, but I mean, I look to be a partner with you during this legislative session. You know, we're still in our board meeting sessions here, and we're always an official body when we're together. But phone calls and some sit-downs and seeing you in Salem, we'll see what that really looks like when it happens. But looking forward to working with you this next year during the legislative session.
Okay, can I ask one more question? So you mentioned that the revenue forecast was released on the 16th, and it looks pretty good for both the general fund and lottery dollars. I mean, that is a forecast for the entire biennium. It's not just for the next fiscal year. I think I'm just still trying to digest that, like how in this moment of like economic uncertainty we can feel comfortable with that kind of a a 2-year forecast.
Yeah, Commissioner, good question. They always predict. They always predict what's going on right now, and so they're required to base their forecast on what they can see now, rather than speculation into the future. But I will say they've been wrong on their last three. They've been wrong ahead of their last 3 forecasts in saying, well, the next forecast is going to be down, or the next forecast is going to be down. And they've been
Right.
state economists have been suggesting that we were going to be down starting in June for the look forward, and we haven't. We've been up, and up. So it's possible that we could be up again. Part of that is because it kind of fits with what I said to a few minutes ago, which is an awful lot of the money the legislature has allocated and appropriated over the last 2 years is just beginning to go out. And so there is going to be this huge wave of infrastructure spending that will keep the construction trades busy, behavioral health spending that will keep the behavioral health sector busy. This is money that has already been appropriated but hasn't yet been spent. In a lot of ways, that's, schools, measure the cat tax, is bringing this wave of money into the schools to be able to hire a whole bunch of new people. Mm-hmm. And so all that money is going to keep people employed and paying taxes. Mm-hmm. So that probably, compared to past downturns, probably mitigates a little the downturn, even if with inflation and the higher prices. At some point there will be a downturn, and that's the state economists predict now a mild recession and not a severe recession. The timing of that mild recession is yet to be determined, but clearly inflation is doing something else, which is it's driving up the cost of all the projects you have. So your courthouse is going to be more expensive, and if you want to hire someone, it's going to cost you more because you're competing with other jurisdictions. So there's not all a silver lining in this story.
Right.
One-time funds for the courthouse. That's a good one that we can focus on.
I have it on my list. Yeah.
Well, I did have a ODOT meeting on Wednesday last week when I was in Eugene. I had to go to Salem. And it sounds like their funding is really questionable. They need to move it over to maintenance. They're really short. So, yeah, we build these things, but then if we can't maintain them, it's a problem. And then, again, whenever you talk about the Department of Motor Vehicles, you know that ODOT is in charge of them, and they are not doing a very good job. So they're, look at how they've been closed, and it's not serving the public. So they're, yes, it's a complicated issue. And then I did find out that there's still something open in Pendleton. For, the state hospital there was closed in 2014, but they still have a couple small facilities there. It sounded like maybe with sex offenders or something. I wasn't aware of that, but if we could get a few numbers added back in that facility, that would be great. I don't know if there's a possibility or not, Doug, but I heard from Gina Nichols that Pendleton State Hospital was the best run hospital in the state, the way they treated people, and perhaps that's why they didn't close it until 2014. Had you ever? Yeah.
Haven't heard of that, but I will talk to Gina.
Okay, yeah, talk to Gina about it, because I thought that was, we need those beds here.
I will note, just on that note, Chair, that one of the things that we've been trying to do, Corey and I have been trying to do, is get out and talk to, our partners in the kind of AOC world. So we've had meetings with AOC and their legislative staff and director, AOCMH. There's a Measure 110 work group that we are now participating in, kind of keep an eye on these issues. I had a long call this morning with CLO, the Coalition of Local Health Officials, to talk about some of the issues. We're now involved in the discussion of a public health town hall that will be taking place in January for all new legislators, et cetera, et cetera. So we're trying to get plugged into, all the key groups that are in this kind of county orbit on key issues. If there are ones we miss, please let us know, and we'll plug ourselves into those too.
Great. And you'll let us know about the 16th then.
Yep, we'll do.
Very good. Thank you, Doug. Thanks for joining us. Whitney?
Quickly, just on next steps, we'll coordinate with Doug on the timing of the next legislative update and when it makes most sense to schedule that. But would the board like to continue to receive that update in a regularly scheduled meeting, or would you prefer to start to transition to what you've typically had in terms of a standalone legislative session? We'll definitely coordinate with Brenda on those details.
I would think we need to go to the standalone.
Okay.
It's going to get really big, and you're saying it's 2 weeks earlier this year, so yes.
Okay, we'll work to put something.
If there's 3,600 bills at a minimum, yeah.
Well, we've got all the department heads, so yeah, that's a whole different mode when we get into going through the bills and having department heads speak on the different topics, so
That's
I
great.
support that.
So when we meet that next time, likely in December, is that kind of, we'll try to propose a frequency for future meetings so that we can get those on your calendar and for department heads as well. So we'll start to get organized on the scheduling front. Thank you.
Doug, is there a better day of the week in terms of the rhythm of legislative activity for us to be doing that meeting?
Commissioner, no day of the week is ever good, and it's always unpredictable, but we'll make, it's, part of it is seeing what the committee schedule will be like, and we don't have that because we're not quite sure what the committees will be or who the chairs will be, but we will make time. And the most important thing is, what works for the three of you. We'll make time on our schedule, so. But, beginning of the week typically is better than the end of the week, in my view, because we can tell you what's coming up, and then we don't. Friday afternoon meeting, we're all kind of busy and ready to go for the weekend, and then by Monday we forget sometimes what's going on, whereas an early in the week meeting, it's sometimes easier to say, well, in 2 days we should be doing X, Y, Z.
Right. Because we do, we have Monday and Wednesday board meetings, and the Monday meeting has historically been more work session-y, so maybe it would make sense to tie it to or piggyback it on our Monday meeting. If beginning of the week is better than end of the week. We can figure that out later, but just throwing that thought out there.
Thank you. Okay, we have healthy schools. Jessica, are you going to cue this one up? Thank you for joining us today. I see we have the annual report.
Yes. Thank you so much. Again, for the record, I am Jessica Jacks, Prevention and Health Promotion Program Manager with Deschutes County Health Services, and I am joined to my right, most immediate right, by Dr. Amy Snyder, who is our Healthy Schools Supervisor, and on the other side of her, Lindsay Seibel, one of our public health specialists. Lindsay's based at Ben Senior High School and works with the middle schools that feed into Ben Senior High. To my left, Sean Reinhardt, Executive Director of Student Services at Ben Lapine Schools. And we are here to celebrate that we have our annual report complete, and I apologize that we are not we're not here earlier. We had hoped to be here in September, but here we are. So we'll move forward. But we want to highlight some of the accomplishments that we've made in that first year, and to give you a sense of direction and where we are with completing and heading toward our long-term outcomes. You should have 2 handouts. I put forward a revised PowerPoint slide handout, and then the actual annual report. Both, actually not the PowerPoint slides, but the annual report can be found on our website as well. And that is, for the public, is deschutes.org/healthy schools. Check us out. We've got a lot of good information there. And I did want to, before we launch into our presentation, for those who might be listening, just to give an overview, quick overview of what Healthy Schools is, and get you excited about this program too. So Healthy Schools is an initiative that places public health specialists that are employed by the county in the school to work and function as part of school staff. They serve as school health coordinators, and they're associated with a high school and the middle schools that feed into those high schools. Public health specialists focus on the topics that we know are of concern in our community's youth, such as suicide, vaping, and other drugs, and other emerging issues that may keep our students from fully being present at school and being successful in school. The program is currently being implemented as a cost-sharing partnership between Deschutes County and Ben Lapine schools. Because of this cost-share arrangement, it allows us to work on the issues that we know our students are struggling with, as opposed to some of the resources that we get where it's very dictated what we can work on. So thank you very much for believing in us and for investing in our kids. I also wanted to let you know that we are getting attention. The Oregon Health Authority and Oregon Department of Education recently, in a recent publication, highlighted Healthy Schools to share out across the state this program as a possibility for others to learn from and implement. And Amy has been invited to present at an upcoming webinar to those different schools and districts across the state. All right, I'm going to move the slides forward. This is a simplified logic model. A logic model is a public health tool that helps us to guide our programming and evaluation. It's a linear visual that describes the resources and activities that go into a program. It's simplified because we actually have a full logic model that we developed in partnership with the Oregon Health Sciences University, their evaluation core team. It's very dense, rich. You need a magnifying glass to read it, but it is available on our website, and I hope that you check it out. It's really a good guiding document. So in this slide, what you're seeing is simply putting that if we do the Healthy Schools activities, those things identified in the gray box, then over time we will achieve certain results. So you'll see the objectives that we seek to achieve in the gold, green, and red boxes. The gold representing short-term objectives, the green box representing midterm, the red box representing long-term. And this pathway is very important to achieve our long-term goals. The work has to be done in a way that we have knowledge of evidence-based activities and strategies, and so that we are essentially paving a foundation to achieve those things that you see in the gold and green boxes in order to achieve those red box results. So today, as you very well know, we are just talking about our one-year-old program, and we're going to report on the activities of Healthy Schools that led to the results that we're seeing in the first year. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Amy.
How do I turn on the microphone?
It's on.
Is it on? Okay. The red light is trickery then.
We have different ones, that's why, but it's on.
Okay, good.
She's got a green light, but yours is red.
That's what I just assumed mine was off.
It's nothing personal.
All right, so just for a brief snapshot of our first year accomplishments, in our program plan for year one, we had a table of the 23 major activities that we had planned for ourselves to do as the public healthy schools staff. Of those 23 major activities, we had 91% of them that were either complete or partially completed. Partially completed means that we completed them at the high school level but did not complete them at the middle school level, or that we had written that we were going to have a communications plan written and published, but we have parts of a communications plan, but it's not written at this point. Just some changes that we had to make along the way. The reason those activities are important is that those 23 activities include these school health core capacity items. So if you look at the left side of the screen, those 4 parts underneath school health core capacity are those pieces that have been found to lead to those results on the right-hand side in Oregon middle and high schools. So those activities that we completed were the school health core capacities that are associated with those outcomes. So we wanted to just share some highlights of our program, and we brought in Lindsay Seibel from Ben Senior High to give us a little summary of a typical day for a public health specialist.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Lindsay Seibel. I'm the public health specialist at Ben Senior High and Pilot Butte Middle. I'm happy to be here today. So they asked me to tell you about a typical day that I have, and the first thing I'll tell you is that I don't have a typical day. Every day is different for me, and I see that as like an advantage of our program, really, because I'm able to be in the school addressing concerns, suggesting resources in the moment as things come up in real time. So what I am going to tell you is I'm going to tell you about a day that I had last week. So it started off, I went to a staff meeting where we were talking about barriers to student attendance, and I was able to put my public health hat on and suggest a student mental health support group so that we can take care of our students so that they're ready to learn. After that, I was able to reach out to our school-based health center, which is on our campus, that's run by Mosaic Medical. And I was able to just be the communicator between them, and I let them know that we were going to have a fire drill that day so that they could let their patients know. I let them know about some other safety protocols that we have at the school, and then I asked them if they had capacity to provide that student mental health support group. After that was my favorite part of the day, where I was able to go into a student classroom, and I get to be an advisor for about 10 students who are putting on a mental health promotion week in January. And so we worked on some activities of what they might want to do there. And I just love working with the students. It's the best part of my job. After that, I had a family liaison ask me about some treatment resources for a parent who was concerned about their kiddo having some screen and gaming addiction. So I was able to suggest some treatment resources to that family liaison, who then told that parent what was some treatment options for them. And then the last thing I did that evening, I had a Connect workshop. And a Connect workshop is an opportunity for parents and guardians to learn the skills to have tough conversations with their kiddos about preventing substance use. And so I set up for this workshop at Pilot Butte Middle and attended the workshop, provided some technical assistance, and then I was able to provide some health resources to the parents that were in attendance, as well as just talk to them, have a conversation, give them my business card, let them know that I was a resource for them. So my job is not often flashy. There's emails in between, there's meetings, but really what I love is that I get to be in the schools and just addressing needs in the moment. So thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Lindsay, if we asked you to, I'm not going to say, tell me about the other 4 days of the week, but if I asked you, what were some of the notable things, other things that you got to do over that last week, that kind of would round out the picture of that one day that you just told us about? What are a couple of things you would also mention?
Sure. So a lot of my job is also reaching back out to our health department, meeting with people, the experts really, and telling them what's going on in the school, and then asking what resources are available that I can bring into the school. So again, it might be a meeting, it might be an email. I'm oftentimes scrambling around between different people, different staff members or classes in the school, answering questions, seeing what resources I can bring into them. And then, of course, there's just long-term planning that we have that would take too long to tell you, but I just have, there's a lot of long-term strategies that we have going on, so implementing those.
Great, thank you.
And if I could just draw a connection, so the staff that we have on our prevention team, like our problem gambling prevention coordinator, our substance misuse prevention coordinator, tobacco prevention specialist, that's who Lindsay touches base with frequently, and those staff then are better informed about how to do their work, but also to support Lindsay in the work that she's doing. So it's a really important relationship that we've been developing and fostering.
Thank you.
So on the slide that we have showing here is just a summary of some of our first year successes. I don't plan to go over all of them. I'm going to highlight just a few of them on these following slides. So one of the first ones that we had shared in December when we came in to talk about early successes last year was suicide prevention education that Lindsay was providing at Ben Senior High. Just to update on that, Lindsay continued to provide more suicide prevention education to both the 9th grade and 10th grade classes and covered both of those two health classes. So she ended up providing over 43 hours of instructional time, relief to the teacher and to the counselors who usually provide that, and then directly provided that suicide prevention education to more than 460 9th and 10th grade students who are in a really critical transition period in their lives. One key thing to note about this education is usually provided by the counselors, which means the counselors are not in their offices to be providing services that only school counselors can do. So by Lindsay providing this education, she was able to free up that time for the school counselor so that they can do what only a school counselor can do. So that's one notable factor of that. We also had family engagement and orientation to health resources. Lindsay mentioned quite a bit about connecting school staff, families, students to health resources. That's one of the key things that our public health specialists do at all sites. So it's really our job to know not necessarily what needs to be done or how it's done, but really what resources are out there and how do we make the most efficient connection so that people don't get lost in the gaps between where they are now and where they're aiming to be. They also provide services at the family nights at their schools to provide information about those resources or to assess what parents are interested in as far as engagement opportunities at their school site or what they want to learn about as far as prevention for adolescent health topics specifically. One thing we found is healthy relationships are a big topic of interest for our parents. And they found really creative ways to do these assessments. They've also been able to help bring in some of our community resources. So you can see on the slide, we have two of our other prevention and health promotion staff at the school buildings. So when, say, Lindsay has a family night, she can let our prevention and health promotion staff know. And if they are also searching for teen community health advocates, they can come out to this event and market that to those students. Or if they're aiming to assess parent interests, they can come out to that event and assess parent interest. So it's just a way of making our work more efficient. We also talked about an early success in December of last year with Lapine's Upshift program. Amanda has been serving as the coordinator of their Upshift program and has been helping to reduce gaps in the workflow. And One thing that she's been able to do is connect with the school's resource officer, which is a Deschutes County Sheriff's Deputy, Deputy Woods. And she informed him about the school's Upshift program and found out that he's interested in being able to refer some of his clients into the Upshift program. He mentioned that there's a big gap between the court, which is, one tool that he has, and just being able to tell families to access resources on their own. And so Amanda was able to work with their school administrator, their counselor, our county Upshift strategist, and the community providers in the local area to make sure they had the capacity to bring in extra students. And so they were able to expand that program, and now the sheriff's deputy can refer students directly into the school's Upshift program. So it's a tool that he can now use that's going to link students to care. And there's a quote on this slide basically recognizing that he had a pretty large gap between the court, what the court can provide, and what the family is able to provide on their own. And now he has a tangible tool to offer families who reach out to him for help and can bring students into this program at the school. One other thing that we've done at the district level is to help string together a series of evidence-based programs to have a continuum of supports that covers all prevention, so primary prevention. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see the health education curriculum, Catch My Breath. It's effective at reducing experimentation with vaping. We've given that to our health teachers, and now they are implementing that in middle school and high school levels, depending on their capacity, but we've been able to provide a training to help them overcome barriers to implementing it. We also have the Connect Parent Workshop, which, as Lindsay had mentioned, helps parents initiate those difficult conversations with their child about substance use before the exposure to substances happens, so before they're offered vaping or whatever it might be. We have early intervention, so we've worked with the district to have Upshift adopted at every school, every middle and high school in the district, which provides a tier 2, so that's a early intervention at school. And then we also have another program that we are starting to implement called My Healthy Future as another tool that schools can add on as an additional layer to that Upshift program. And then we have an array of referred treatment options depending on the specific issue or the program, and we help our school staff know which one of these tools to use when, and we help to just make sure that we're offering complementary, not duplicative, services in these different program areas. So different people are implementing these different programs, but we provide basically a full wraparound service of prevention, early intervention, and referral to treatment. And we also aim to do this coming year with suicide prevention and violence prevention, to have that full suite of services. We've also been working at the district level for systemic district health education resources. We established the first ever health and PE educator network for secondary health and PE teachers, which convenes them as a group so that they can learn from each other, share resources, and we can have a more consistent health education curriculum across grade levels and across levels, so being at the middle and the high school level and consistent across sites. We were able to identify their needs, being materials, training, and family support for certain health topics, and now we are overcoming those barriers. We provided 3 professional developments, including one being an orientation to Catch My Breath that Lindsay was able to provide in partnership with our county tobacco prevention specialist and one of the teen community health advocates, a student from Ben Senior High who was able to talk to teachers about how to get students involved in leading peer group discussions. This work has led to us being able to provide 10.5 hours of professional development to our secondary health teachers this year. It's important to have that capacity building year to be able to identify what trainings they need so that this year we've been able to implement those trainings. We've also been working on developing a plan for what curriculum is taught at each grade level so that we don't have teachers figuring it out on their own, duplicating it. They have a really nice packaged plan whenever they start teaching health. And this is a quote from one of our health teachers. just about how the work that we've been doing with our health teachers helps them to tailor their curriculum to meet the needs of students. One of the things we do is we show them their student health data so that they can pick the curriculum that's going to best meet the needs of students right now. A teaser that we have, we know our Board of County Commissioners and our budget committees have been really eager to have our results. And one result that we are looking forward to for this next year for our midterm section of our logic model, so the green box, is the Positive Youth Development Benchmark. And so you can see it circled there in the green box at the bottom. This benchmark is in the Oregon Student Health Survey collected every even year, and it includes these 6 measures. So the first measure is really 2 measures, physical health and mental and emotional health of students, and then their competence and confidence to be able to do things if they really try, their connection to a caring adult at school, and their contribution to community. Often we think of that as service or advocacy in their community. This measure or this metric is highly associated with having mostly A's and B's, having more health promoting behaviors, and having less suicide consideration, being in a fight in school, being suspended, reporting substance use, or having sex. So it consistently predicts these other health behaviors that we are looking to change with this program, and it's going to be an early indicator that we're reaching progress towards those long-term student health outcomes that we're aiming to reach. So as far as our baseline data go, about 2 of every 3 students in Ben Lapine schools are reaching the Positive Youth Development Benchmark. But if you look at this slide or the graph on the left, there's the 6th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade Positive Youth Development data, and you can see a stepwise decrease at each grade level. So as students are maturing, they're losing their confidence, their competence, their connection to adults, and that's why our program starts in the high school level. We really start to build those connections and supports there, and then we work down to the middle school level, and we take that engagement that we already have there and we hang on to it as they mature through to high school. One way that we're working to increase, I jumped ahead on my slides. One of the measures or one of the student health outcomes that's highly associated with positive youth development outcomes is seriously considering suicide. There is a significant disparity between seriously considering suicide for students who reach the positive youth development benchmark versus students who don't. It's almost a 500% difference. So when we look at why does positive youth development benchmark matter, this is one of those reasons it matters to us. It's protective against things like suicide consideration, substance use, risky behaviors. So this is more data on the difference there. If a student does not meet the positive youth development benchmark, there's a 1 in 5 chance that they will report seriously considering suicide versus a 1 in 25 chance of reporting that if they do reach the positive youth development benchmark. One way that we are working to increase the positive youth development benchmark in Ben Lapine schools is through that health education work that we're doing. Skills-based health ed increases students' confidence in their ability to apply their skills when it's needed. It also increases their connection to a caring adult in school. And it also contributes to their community because there's advocacy parts in school-based health ed. So this is data from our professional development that we did this year. We provided 10.5 hours of professional development on best practices and skills-based health ed to our middle school teachers as a cohort and to our high school teachers as a cohort. So collectively, we did 21 hours of professional development. And our health teachers at the end of this training said that that training increased their knowledge and confidence to be able to implement those best practices in skills-based health ed, which is the majority of the time being students practicing and demonstrating proficiency in the health skills that are targeted. And my last slide, I believe. This is the teachers reporting of the potential impact of those tools and strategies on student growth. So we asked them what kind of impact do they feel the tools and strategies we provided during that workshop would have on their student growth, and majority of them reported that it would be a substantial impact to a moderate impact on student growth. So this doesn't quite tell us yet how it will be affecting students, but this is the teachers' perspective based on their experience of working with students, that those tools will make an impact on their students. And this is my last slide, so any questions?
Can I actually chime in before y'all ask any questions?
Sure.
Please do.
I could probably give a voiceover on every one of these slides too, just thinking about the impact that it's had on our district in such a short amount of time. When I speak for all of our leadership, I can't say enough about what this has done and how quickly we've moved forward in terms of adding this element of school health into our schools. I meet with Dr. Schneider every Monday, and we do our operations meeting. We basically just churn through a list of different things that are needed, or ideas that are being had, or barriers that we need to eliminate. And could you go back to the logic model real quick? When I was looking at the logic model, particularly the year one, I can think of a variety of different things that we're doing that live in that logic model that actually are real, So for example, one of the great things about doing the school health improvement planning process with school teams is that prior to this, schools didn't really understand what school health meant, or didn't really have, we had our own ideas, we're educators, but when we have professionals who are health professionals who come in and explain it to us and give us evidence-based practices and examples about that, the whole staff become educated about what health looks like and what health for their students look like, and what our roles are in schools and how we can help. So by doing that, with each of the schools, now all of the staff have an idea of what are some areas that they want to look at. We, whenever we define, what do we want to improve, Amy and her team are always able to say, here's a variety of evidence-based practices, which we've actually been able to implement. So Upshift is a great example. They talk about Upshift, where we have, ask any parent, ask any teacher, vaping's a huge issue in our secondary schools right now.
Is it going down? I mean, Jewel, I know, got shut down.
It is pervasive as ever right now. And so Upshift is an intervention that we're hoping will, we're hoping that will kind of stop it from going up further and stop recidivism by giving students some health education around vaping and why it's not healthy, and what are some alternatives they can do, or how they can say no, or how they can sort of change course on things. But again, it's an education model versus just a punitive model. For our only tool is to suspend kids. They go away for 2 or 3 days, vape, come back to school, and it was back off to the races again. So, so that's a great example. Another great example is I work really closely with Dr. Schneider on development of our Addies Act plan, which is at the state level, every school district is required to have a suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention plan that we're updating every year. She's helped us bring a coalition of lots of professionals in the community, including folks in our schools, and we've added several evidence-based programs in the prevention side of things that are health promoting and really supporting students with just better wellness altogether as a prevention strategy. The health education piece that she just ended, I can't say enough about that. We had no coherence. We had health teachers all over the district doing their best to implement the state standards. And we have state standards around health and mental wellness and suicide prevention and violence prevention. But there was no coherence among that group of teachers in the implementation of that. And there's no real coherence in implementation of the curricula, because so much of the curricula is local based. You have to pull together local resources that are contextual for the kids at that school with what are the issues going on for them. And through this project, we've been able to do that. And that's why you see the health teachers saying, oh, I feel so much better about teaching this content. And when teachers feel really good and confident and competent teaching content, the kids the students see that and they feel that, and they become, it's a more effective way of doing it. So, again, I can't say enough about how quickly it's taken hold. And, you know, for the year 2 schools like Bend High and Lapine, if you were to ask them about their public health specialists, they, you know, that is an essential part of their staffing model now. They do so much for the school now. And in our year 1 schools, they're starting to you know, understand what this new resource really is and can mean. So anyway, I just can't say enough. It's been a very, I've learned so much. I did not know a lot about public health, and now I feel like I know quite a bit, and it's helped me change my practice and the way I view my job and what we're doing in school. So that's it.
Thank you, Sean. Are there any other questions?
Thank you for the update. I mean, it's good to hear the big picture and what's going on here, that's for sure.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
I guess one question I have is, and maybe I'm asking this as a parent too, but you know, so I am a parent of a high schooler at Bend High, so I have the benefit of hearing about these programs and the impacts they're having at the schools sitting up here. But I'm curious, what opportunities do your, you know, kind of everyday parents have to be aware of this program and kind of the way that it's changing you know, curriculum and the social environment in schools, and you know, really transforming schools in significant ways as a place where they're sending their kid every day?
We've gone back and forth on this, thinking about, do we market this program to parents? And we've decided that we don't. So usually when we're giving out resources or we're sharing information with parents, we're doing it as a representative of the school or of the district. So I might say I'm a public health specialist, or that I work for the public health department, but I'm really there representing the school and the district's interests. Lindsay is part of Bend Senior High School staff. So we don't differentiate ourselves when we're talking to parents, because really ultimately we're there as an agent of the school to reach out and engage parents in the school. And so that's part of our work, to integrate this into the school as much as possible, not to be seen as a separate program. Though we do have some communications. For instance, we are likely going to be on the district's Soups On podcast soon. And that'll be specifically for parents, and it'll talk about what the district's doing for vaping response. And we will be talking about, it's part of our Healthy Schools program, that this work is happening, and that's my role with the district, is bringing in the public health expertise. So we will talk about our Healthy Schools program when it's relevant to parents, but we don't aim to market it to parents, especially if it comes at the cost of showing that this is a resource that the school has, that it belongs to the school.
Yeah, no, and I guess I wasn't necessarily asking, you know, how are we making parents know that Deschutes County Public Health is doing stuff in the schools. I was just kind of curious what level of awareness parents have of the Healthy Schools program overall, kind of, and that it's, you know, that's there, that it is changing the way that the school operates in some certain ways that hopefully are beneficial for their kids. So, but you hearing about the talk with the podcast with the superintendent, that's really helpful to know, and yeah, and I don't have an opinion on what the right way to do that or how much to do that is, but I was just curious about that.
And they may, there's opportunities where the public health specialists are at family nights, and they may, when they're engaging with parents, explain that role and what they're doing, but it's not necessarily a mass communication. I can give example too from Summit. One of our public health specialists had a breakout session, and so they had 100 parents at the event, and they had 5 different breakout sessions, and so she held a session and describe to the parents what kind of school health programs they have. So covering a lot of what we talked about, Upshift, but other ones too that do mental health promotion. She described her role as a public health specialist and doing that school improvement process. And then also assessed what type of information they would like about parenting strategies that work for prevention. So she was able to both inform them about her work, but also assess, and then also inform them about positive parenting strategies.
Great. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Jessica, do we get an update every quarter or every 6 months?
We have an annual report, so that comes out August, September, and we can come to you even as frequently as you would like us to, so we can.
Well, it might be interesting to know in another 6 months what, what greater progress has happened.
Sure, yeah. That will be incorporated.
Because, our budget will be coming up again.
Yes, we will be incorporating that into the budget presentation, but am I hearing?
It would be good to hear beforehand. Thank you.
Another question associated with that is the school board getting updates kind of same cycle, same frequency as we are, or?
We will be at the Ben Lapine Schools Board of Directors in January doing a similar annual report to them. So whenever we go through and do a report to you, we also send it out to our executive leaders in the district, and they decide whether or not it's time to go to their board of directors, depending on what they know is relevant and needed for the board of directors.
Great, thank you.
Jessica, maybe in 4 months, because in 6 months it's May, so in 4 months would be appropriate. Thank you. Okay, next we have a letter that had been requested by Tillamook County for the entire state to help with the problem that's not getting quite addressed, and they're hoping that we can be part of their support. It was at our the natural resources breakfast Wednesday morning.
Good afternoon. For the record, Eric Kropp, Deputy County Administrator. At the request of Commissioner Adair, staff drafted the letter which is in the board packet. It's a draft letter asking the congressional delegation from Deschutes County for their assistance in delaying implementation of the National Marine Fisheries Services biological opinion. So in your packet is a draft letter for board discussion and consideration.
Yeah, so Commissioner Yamamoto from Tillamook County was sharing this information around and pointing out that if the flood insurance program goes away, people that might lose a structure someday wouldn't even be able to rebuild, which ends up in a bad situation for private property owners that don't even have the opportunity to rebuild better, is one of the scenarios I'm understanding. So, any other thoughts?
I've worked at the interface of floodplains and aquatic habitat for 25 years, and I'm not sure whether this is the right approach to this issue. In just my opinion, basically the implementation of this BIOP is following a model in the state of Washington, and legal challenges and legislative challenges have been unsuccessful in kind of getting the federal government to take a different direction. I mean, basically, you're fighting federal law. So I don't. In my opinion, what might be a more productive way for Tillamook County to be approaching this issue would be to work with the National Flood Insurance Program and NIMPS and FEMA and turn around to the state and say, okay, we have these areas that are prone to flooding. Flooding is getting more and more severe. Our understanding of what used to be a 100-year floodplain, it was not accurate. So we are going to have a need to move certain activities, move certain structures out of the floodplain. The state land use planning system, here's a place where, like I think some tweaks of the state land use planning system are appropriate to look at. So I think that places like Tillamook County should be asking the state, can we essentially trade out some of the area that we're currently using for certain kinds of agricultural activities, certain kinds of structures, for more area where you could rebuild a dairy barn or something like that higher out of the floodplain. So essentially ask the state for some flexibility in that way, and ask the state, since removing all this development pressure and economic activity from floodplains will actually provide substantial habitat benefits, which is the reason why the National Marine Fisheries Service is pushing it in the first place. Ask the state for money. So you ask the state for some land use flexibility to be able to move things to appropriate long-term locations, and ask them for funding support to support, to expedite that and facilitate that, rather than trying to fight FEMA and the National Marine Fisheries Service on the policy that I can almost assure you is going to be implemented based on the experience in Washington State. So so I don't necessarily think that this is the right policy approach. Commissioner Yamamoto and I have discussed this a number of times, but he's firmly of a different opinion. And I just don't think that this is relevant to Deschutes County, and we should at best, at most, be staying neutral on this. I would ask staff to research for us exactly how many properties in Deschutes County are covered by the National Flood Insurance Program before we made any choices about this letter. Because I'm pretty sure that it's a very small number, if there are any. So
Yeah, Peter has some information put in context for us here in Deschutes County. As I say, I want to be engaged and be an advocate for good, but I don't have a lot of good detail in this one yet. So, Commissioner Dare, do you?
Chair Yamamoto had said that some counties that really didn't even have floodplains were participating, supporting their issues. If you read the concerns, the nail in the coffin for farmers, I just feel like, okay, if they're fighting it and if we can help them, I'm all for helping them. It's the state of Oregon, and if Tillamook has a really big problem, I know they would try and help us if we had a problem.
And did we do this a year or two ago? Have we been on this topic before?
Yeah, thank you.
I forget, yeah.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. Deschutes County is not subject to the BIOP in this case, and that's due to the fact that Big Falls, which is just north of Lower Bridge, provides a physical barrier for anadromous fish to migrate past that natural obstruction. There's been some reintroduction to steelhead on Whiteous, but that's a 10J experimental designation. So, like I said, Deschutes County is not one of the effective counties as it pertains to this biological opinion with NIMS and as it interfaces FEMA and the National Flood Insurance Program. However, what I would offer for your consideration, and it's an agenda item unrelated, pertaining to sage grouse, is that whether or not the board wants to provide a letter or not, I think this was a topic of conversation with the Association of County Planning Directors at AOC in Eugene last week. A number of counties are really concerned about what this program may represent locally, and they're respectfully asking for a pause, as noted in the letter that administration drafted. And what it may do, and I tried to offer it to Commissioner Yamamoto and to their legal counsel that was online, is that it may provide opportunities to respectfully request a memorandum of understanding to participate as a cooperating agency, prior to or as part of the NEPA process for an environmental assessment or environmental impact statement. And that, as the board is well aware, with sage grouse or through the Habitat Conservation Plan, local governments can provide and are experts as it pertains to socioeconomic issues and certainly some of the environmental programs that have been implemented locally. So that was something that I recommended to the planning directors and the commissioner from Tillamook County, and I offer that for your consideration. Whether or not you want to write the letter or not, I think a pause could give those counties more time to engage. They personally don't feel like the process has allowed local governments to express the challenges that are expressed in the BIOP and several of the alternatives. And many of their communities are built in floodplains, so it's those coastal communities, those Willamette Valley communities, this is at the local level is a very significant issue.
So the letter that I'm looking at now says, please consider adding language in support of delaying the implementation. Are you saying something a little bit different than that, Peter?
I was just using the word pause. I know that Representative DeFazio, I think, was able to successfully pause it previously. Of course, DeFazio, Congressman Peter DeFazio is no longer he won't be in office in the next term. So there's a tremendous hope that during what do they call this? The short session, the session that ends in December, that there might be enough time with Congressman Peter DeFazio to elevate this issue with the entire congressional delegation with Congress to extend that pause that would then allow local governments to re-engage possibly as a cooperating agency. So
Sorry?
No, I'm sorry. That was a delay, a pause. I'm using that term interchangeably.
Okay, but to use matching terminology is always a good idea.
Yeah, that's just the term that they were using last week.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I would just again go back to, I am very sympathetic that in rugged Western Oregon, the best places for people to build historically have been the flat places, and the only flat places are floodplains. But ignoring that flooding is going to just become more and more severe in those locations is delaying helping their residents from suffering catastrophic losses. This is being driven by fisheries concerns, but the basic concept is if you're in a floodplain and you're likely to get flooded, maybe you should be thinking about having your structure, having your activity somewhere outside of that floodplain. And the BIOP just helps to move that process farther along. And so fighting the BIOP instead of doing what I was describing earlier, like asking the state for help with land use to help people move out of the path of danger, and to get funding support to enable them to do that, I don't think is the right approach. And I just think we're kind of, we're trying, it sends the message that we're trying to help people stick their head in the sand.
I like the idea of a shortened letter asking for the opportunity to, delay the implementation, for some more conversation to happen. It's a great idea to say that we'd like to swap land, but what have we seen in the state of Oregon? not in my backyard, not over there either. So you're offering something that's very hard to come by. You know, anybody, any land,
These would be the right reasons
the right reasons.
to ask, given the framework of the state land use planning system.
I'm just pointing out that it's a big ask. Either way, it's a big ask. So that gives me clarity. So, as I say, possibly put it on one page even. I mean, my vision is, you know, consolidate all the addresses, get it out to the current legislation, put it on one page, and show support for delaying implementation. It's a vision I have for.
No, that
yeah.
sounds like a great idea, one page, and, you know, using, if Representative DeFazio likes the word pause, then we'll use that word.
Right, well, we can move to the vote. We'll have a 2-to-1
Okay,
vote.
so let's have
and
a
we can
vote.
proceed.
Okay.
So, as I say,
Have this be official
with that
then?
vision, let's support a letter, what'll be a version which generally the same content, shorter version, showing support for delaying the implementation of the Oregon BIOP, and we'll leave it at that. Yeah,
One suggestion.
That's a motion?
sure, we can.
Perhaps chair signature, that way it kind of.
Oh, there you go. Yep, chair signature. That works.
That would
good
be
too.
excellent.
I just will also say that this is inconsistent with the way that the agricultural community has approached Endangered Species Act issues in this basin, which is by embracing proactive steps like the Habitat Conservation Plan that basically will get us to a new place. You know, transforming irrigation infrastructure to save a bunch of water is also not an easy lift, but it is the path that we're on here, and it is because people who look at habitat and federal regulations in a proactive and constructive way. So, this, in my opinion, the opposite of that, but you can have your 2-to-1 vote.
Thank you. So you made a motion, Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
The chair's signature, I'll second it. Any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
No?
And the chair votes yes, I'll sign it. So we can work on that tomorrow, the next day.
We'll update the draft.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're now to item number 16.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Tarek Rawlings, Associate Planner with the Community Development Department. I actually have both these 16 and 17 items, so I'll sit here for a little while longer than normal. First item before you is a memorandum of understanding from the Bureau of Land Management related to greater sage grouse management, mostly in the eastern portion of the county. This would be continued coordination with the BLM in terms of their management of sage grouse as a protected species under the Endangered Species Act, essentially. So this is building on their habitat and conservation plans that have been drafted and amended at least 3 other times, 2014, 15, and 19, sort of building on the initial effort to protect the species. And so this would be, this was kind of the most recent draft that's been vetted by legal counsel, and they're looking for signature on this MOU if the county was interested in continuing working with the BLM as a cooperating agency as they refine these plans and kind of move forward with continued management of sage grouse. So we would recommend signature, just building on our previous efforts, but of course welcome any thoughts or any different directions the board has in mind.
Tarek, I wanted to ask, how much BLM land that's important to sage grouse is there in Deschutes County?
Sure, it'd be kind of hard to give you a rough acreage approximation, but it's mostly kind of the northern boundary of the eastern sort of foot of Deschutes County. There's there's actually 4 areas that are distinctly separate, but they all kind of bridge the border between Crook and Deschutes counties, basically along that sort of southeastern, the northern edge of that southeastern portion of the county, exactly.
A very small area.
It exactly, and it's all within BLM federal jurisdiction, and so the county can weigh in terms of the zoning that maybe applies over the top of it, but they are the federal entity that really manages that land and makes kind of the final decision on a lot of that management.
Because a lot of I know that, there's a decent amount of sage grouse activity out there in East County, but a lot of that is private land. So
Correct, right.
Right. So that will lead me to my second question is, what is the time commitment from Deschutes County to, act in this cooperator status? Because if we're talking about a very small amount of land, and if it's a significant amount of staff time, I would actually prefer to use the staff time for something else.
Sure. So yeah, just in talking with the representative from BLM, it does sound like it's a fairly low time commitment from staff. It's myself and the chair are listed as sort of the representatives of county, and so if one wasn't available, the other could attend. I would assume that I would attend if you ever had any other scheduling conflicts or things like that. But so just in terms of that availability, that's the staff that's listed that we would provide as representatives. They've also provided us a tentative list in, I believe it's attachment B, is the schedule there. It goes through about spring of 2024, but I would say it's a fairly slow moving process, and that check-ins with the county would not be potentially as substantive as maybe check-ins with other biologists and things that were more directly related to wildlife. We have say and expertise on the land and the land use regulations and some of the plans that affect that area, but we can weigh in that capacity as a cooperating agency. We're able to offer concerns or comments on the alternatives they produce. That's largely the activities that I envision the county being involved with during the NEPA review process. Yep.
Thank you.
Well, and, Commissioner Chang and I went out there a couple summers ago with Ed Keith and Dr. Young, was it? Stuart Young? I think, yeah. Stu Garrett, that's what, yeah, okay. And, got to kind of see the interplay between the public lands and the private lands out there too, though. So there is some private land activity that I'm sure the advocates for sage grouse don't want to see that activity. So there is a confluence of Deschutes County land use associated with this also. And I've always been supportive of being at the table.
Certainly.
I think it's important to be at the table.
I guess, again, I would just say this is an insignificant number of federal acres, and especially with my concerns for our limited community development department staff time to work on things like our wildlife inventory updates. If we're constantly making choices to postpone really important projects like that, then I would like to eliminate some of the reasons that some of the staffing constraints that we have that force us to postpone really important projects like that. So I'm not going to fall on my sword about this, but I don't think that this is an important place for us to be spending our time.
So is there, we need a motion?
As I say, I do support this, so
Is that a motion?
I'll move approval of chair signature on this MOU establishing Deschutes County as a cooperating agency with the BLM with respect to land use plans involving the management of greater sage grouse.
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you
Great.
very much, commissioners. And
Okay, now you have the next item?
yeah, exactly. Well, I'll work with admin for a signature on that document, and we'll get that back to BLM as soon as possible. I think the next steps would be that they hold a remote meeting introducing the cooperating agencies, some kind of a kickoff meeting. So I'll be in touch when that's
Is it like
scheduled.
the 28th or something?
I don't think they'd picked a date quite
Okay.
yet, so
All
they're
right.
still
I was
waiting.
thinking I had some crazy conflict, so.
Yeah, I haven't heard a date yet, so they're still waiting for signatures probably. But
Okay, good.
yeah, thank you very much, board. And if we're ready for.
Yes, go ahead.
So item number 17, today is a first reading, consideration of first reading of ordinance number 2022-011. This is plan amendment zone change for the LBNW LLC. It's a property, or it's technically 3 tax lots along Northern Highway 97, proposing to change the plan amendment from agricultural to rural industrial, and then the zoning from exclusive farm use to rural industrial. This follows a series of public hearings, an initial public hearing from a hearings officer in April of this year, and then a board hearing following that several months later. Ultimately, we had a majority of the board move to approve this decision, approving the plan amendment and zone change. And so in the intervening weeks, we've worked with the applicant, we've worked to compile record and draft up a decision that captures the deliberation points that the board reached just last month. And then we would, 2 months ago now at this point. And so we're moving into first reading of that drafted ordinance. There's the ordinance itself, which is on page 94, 95 of your packet. I have copies here if you need another copy. You guys have it up there?
We have it.
Okay, perfect. And then attached to that are several exhibits. So you'll have Exhibit A is the legal description. You have Exhibit B and C are the maps related to the zone change and plan amendment. And then that's followed by the different comprehensive plan documents. So Chapter 512's updates, Chapter 23.01's updates, and then the draft board decision, which is Exhibit F, and then followed finally by the hearings officer's recommendation as Exhibit G. So it's a large packet including all those exhibits. And so that's been prepared for you today to review as your first reading. So I'm here for any questions you might have. It's basically a review of this prepared ordinance and its exhibits.
Right. Thank you so much.
So just one observation, this is on the ground, may not even be associated with the paperwork at all, but just kind of the dark skies concept. I know that, I don't know if the property owner's here or not, but there's some signs on the current building up there, and I was just driving by, and the face is off of one of them, and it's kind of bright. So as we talk about dark skies, this is going to be a rural industrial zone property, and just having the signage and on-site lighting, just respecting dark sky. So I'm not even asking for any of this paperwork to change specifically.
It's a really good thought as we're trying to collect examples about dark skies. So that's helpful for me.
So I think there's like 4 box signs, and one of them is missing like half of the sign. So it's just really bright as you're driving by. And I noticed that now that we've talked about dark skies.
No, it's good to know. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, that's like me and the trees that are dying next to the solar farm.
Gotcha, right, yeah, I remember you mentioning that, exactly.
Somebody needs to water them.
So there are multiple motions, or just the ordinance itself?
It's in title only. There still needs to be a second reading 2 weeks
Yeah,
from
but
now.
I mean, sometimes so this isn't a plan amendment and zone change, or is it, or 2 different? I do the one thing, yep, got it.
Within the same ordinance.
So I'll move first reading by title only of ordinance number 2022-011.
Okay. And I will second it. Any further discussion?
I will reiterate my earlier no vote in the quasi-judicial hearing on this item, and just say once again that I'm not persuaded that these lands are unsuitable for agriculture. And I have a general concern that the more opportunities like this exist for converting EFU land to other uses, the higher land costs will go for agricultural land, and the more difficult it will be for beginning farmers or other farmers to practice their trade.
Okay. For the vote, Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
No.
And the chair votes yes. For first reading by title only, an ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 23, the Deschutes County Comprehensive Plan to change the comprehensive plan map designation for certain property from agricultural to rural industrial, and amending Deschutes County Code Title 18, the Deschutes County zoning map to change the zone designation for certain property from exclusive farm use to rural residential, industrial. Oh, I always do that wrong. Bad habit. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks for reading the full ordinance. It's a long one. Thank you.
Oh.
Appreciate
I
it.
know,
We'll
it
be back in 2 weeks then for
More
second
weeks?
reading. Yeah.
Thank you, Tariq.
Appreciate your time. You have a good afternoon, commissioners.
Okay. All right. Next, item number 18.
Thank you, Commissioner Adair. Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, my name is Hallie King, Associate Planner with Deschutes County. And I am also here today for the first reading and draft decision review for Ordinance 2022-013. And this is in regard to the Eden Plan Amendment Zone Change application, which includes about 710 acres to the west of Terrebonne. The applicant is proposing to change the comp plan from agriculture to rural residential exception area and a corresponding zone change from EFU to RR10. And just to recap kind of how we got here for the board, we had a public hearing on August 17th, 2022, and the board deliberated on this application on September 28th, 2022, with the majority voting to approve the application. And then similar to the last item, we have here in your packet, the draft board decision, which is Exhibit F, in addition to the ordinance and the attachments, including the zone map, comprehensive plan map, and the changes that the application will bring. And so again, we're here, any comments that the board has on the draft decision, and then if there are no comments, we would obviously entertain a motion to move to approve the ordinance as written.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any comments to this?
So this was a hearings officer approval that comes in front of the board on this one. So it was an approval that came to the board, just acknowledging the path here. Yeah, I do support, the application as written and as I say, there'll be a difference of opinion up here. So just acknowledging that. So with that, I'll get us started. Move approval or first reading of ordinance number 2022-013 by title only.
Okay, and I will second it. Any further discussion?
I'll say again, and especially for this piece of land, that I'm not persuaded that it is unsuitable for agriculture, particularly because we had a almost adjacent rancher telling us about how amazing a piece of property this would be for dry land grazing as part of their ranching operation, if the land was available to them. Speculative rezones like this are driving up the price of land, and again, making it more difficult for farmers and ranchers to do their agricultural business. So I'm very concerned about this trend of doing comp plan amendments and rezones like this. I also do not believe that this application and the hearing officer's recommendations on it takes sufficient account of the impacts on wildlife habitat and groundwater.
Great job.
Great job.
Yeah, reviewing all the different reasons you oppose it. There's different views of this. As I say, it's awkward because it's a hearings officer approval. The land use system of the state of Oregon has authorized this path, but with other previous approvals. So,
yes, this
good job
legal,
listing
this
everything
legal
up.
rabbit trail has been well beaten by like a certain group of land use attorneys. That's right.
Well, and I guess I'm just acknowledging that, you're able to, bring all the reasons, and I mean, I could too, but bring all the reasons that you don't agree with it. And it's awkward with the state's land use system for showing approval and hearing so many reasons that environmentalism would stop private property rights. I guess, I'm just acknowledging that. It's hard to.
The reasons that agriculture and people who don't want their well to go dry would stop a project like this. The reasons the only environmental reason I listed was wildlife habitat. And the way that our state land use planning system works is we have a chance to hear items after a hearings officer makes a recommendation or a decision. And we do not have to agree with that one. And whether we agree with it or not, the application will go on to the Land Use Board of Appeals, and they will have an opportunity to form an opinion on this issue. So,
And I would acknowledge that it's a
So-
shame. So you're pointing out that we're a
so-
speed bump in the process of an approved, you just acknowledged that the well-beaten path of an approval is going to be challenged once again, and it's going to waste people's time and money.
well, I would say that I do not agree with the way that the hearings officer interpreted the situation. And that is both a job, a duty of the Board of Commissioners, and a responsibility that I take very seriously, is to review land use decisions that come before us.
Okay, I just would like to just say one small thing. I think Nick sent us the population increases from Portland State, and according to that report, rural Deschutes County only increased less than 100. I can't believe that, but wasn't that last year's increase? Nick, do you remember seeing that?
I do.
I thought it
thanks
was
to Peter.
immaterial. It was so small. I just was like, oh my gosh, less than 100?
And thanks to Peter Gutowski, our Community Development Director, he's asked Portland State to review the methodology to determine the accurate number. And I don't know if Peter has anything else to share, but
Okay.
PSU's agreed to take a look at the methodology.
So you guys all thought it was rather strange, too? Yeah. I was like,
Or anything, but Peter
Okay.
and the Community Development team have asked them to review the
Okay.
methodology and the numbers.
all right. Okay, great. Commissioner DeBonne, was that a motion you had made?
Yeah, so we were in the middle of the motion, and
Okay, and I had seconded it, and we had our discussion. So let's call for the vote. Commissioner DeBonne?
yes.
Commissioner Chang?
No.
And the chair votes yes. All right. Oh, by title only? Okay.
Do the reading.
Don't forget, an ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 23, the Deschutes County Comprehensive Plan to change the comprehensive plan map designation for certain property from agriculture to rural residential exception area, and amending Deschutes County Code Title 18, the Deschutes County zoning map to change the zone designation for certain property from exclusive farm use to rural residential. Thank you so much. So we'll see you in 2 weeks then?
Yes, I think we're working on the schedule, likely December 14th.
Okay. Okay, December 14th then. Okay, great. Thank you. I will make note. So we are now to item number 19. Can we take a 2-minute
Yeah.
break?
Is there any signatures we need to do, or was it just for?
I signed it already, whatever it was.
Okay.
Okay, 2-minute break. Thank you very much. Oh, here's my script to follow you. We need to reconvene our meeting, please. Thank you so very much. It's item number 19, our psilocybin time, place, and manner amendments. Tanya.
Thank you, Chair Adair. For the record, my name is Tanya Saltzman. I'm a senior planner with Community Development. I recognize we do have a little bit of a compressed timeline, so I'm going to speak even faster than I usually do. We do have to go through some kind of procedural stuff at the beginning, so I'll begin if that's okay. This is a public hearing on file number 247-22-000-676TA to amend the Deschutes County zoning ordinance Title 18 to adopt time, place, and manner regulations concerning psilocybin businesses pursuant to ballot measure 109. The Board of County Commissioners will hear oral testimony, receive written testimony, and consider the testimony submitted at this hearing. The hearing is also being recorded. The board may make a decision on this matter today, continue the public hearing to a date certain, or leave the written record open for a specified period of time. The hearing will be conducted in the following order. Staff representing the county as the applicant will give a report on the issue. We'll then open the hearing to all present and ask people to present testimony either in person or by video or by phone. You can also provide the board with written testimony. You can hand it to our county administrator or to me. It'll get to us either way. Questions to and from the board's chair may be entertained at any time at the chair's discretion. Cross-examination of people testifying will not be allowed. However, if any person wishes to ask a question of another person during that person's testimony, please direct your question to the chair after being recognized. The chair is free to decide whether or not to ask such questions of the person testifying. Prior to the commencement of the hearing, any party may challenge the qualifications of any commissioner for conflict of interest. The challenge must be documented with specific reasons supported by facts. Should any commissioner be challenged, the member may disqualify him or herself, withdraw from the hearing, or make a statement on the record of their capacity to hear and decide this issue. Following the hearing procedures, we will ask if any members of the board need to set forth any information that may be perceived as a conflict of interest. Now I'm going to briefly go through all the fun tech stuff. You probably all know it, but we are going to do it anyway. So to comply with House Bill 2560, it's a hybrid meeting with remote and in-person participation. We're going to start with in-person participants. Please raise your hand to testify or fill out a blue form that's off to the side with your name and address, and you'll be called up. I will note that we do have some people who've traveled from out of town, so if there's any way that the chair could prioritize somehow those people, because we do have a limited amount of time, that would be great if possible. Then we'll go to Zoom participants next. They're either panelists or attendees. When you're an attendee, you can view the panelists, but you're not shown on video yet, or you don't have audio access yet until you're promoted to a panelist. Panelists are on video and have control of their own audio. We want you to be aware of the mute button, the stop video, and the raised hand. I'm sure we are well familiar with those, but we want to reiterate that. For telephone attendees, you can press *6 to mute or unmute, *9 to raise your hand. That is that. So if you want to testify and you're using Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. By using the button or by pressing *9. You'll then be elevated from attendee status to panelist, and you'll be unmuted. It does take a few seconds, so don't panic if you kind of black out for a minute on the screen. You will then provide your testimony, and then you will be returned to attendee status, and your audio will be muted. And we will go down the line until all of the Zoom participants are done. And then we'll go through that via telephone. Written testimony, as I noted, you can hand to staff or to the desk up in the front. You may also email me written testimony. I realize the screen is a little bit hard to see, but my email is tanya.saltzman@deschutes.org, and I will make this available after the hearing. It's also available on our project website, which has the complete record thus far, as well as all of the kind of memos, presentations, and all of the supporting documentation. I do want to note also briefly that if the county's internet connection is interrupted, we will try to get back online as possible. Just please be patient. Give us a couple of minutes to reactivate the public hearing. Sometimes things go weird and you just need to wait it out for a few seconds and you will be joined back. Now I'll go to the chair.
Does any commissioner have anything to disclose? And if so, please state the nature of same and whether you can proceed. Commissioner Chang?
I have nothing to disclose and I can proceed.
And Commissioner Devon?
I have nothing to disclose.
And as chair, I have nothing to disclose.
Does any party wish to challenge any commissioner as a member of the hearings body based on conflicts of interest?
Okay. Are there any raised hands on Zoom, Stephanie? None, okay. As no challenges are presented prior to opening the hearing, does anyone have any procedural objections to the public hearing? Do we see any on Zoom? Seeing none, the hearing is now open. Staff will proceed with a brief staff report.
Thank you. And I will try to make it as brief as possible. I know many of the people who are planning to testify today have testified in the past and probably seen a version of this presentation, but I want to make sure that everybody is on the same page. So first, I'll briefly summarize the text amendments, go a little bit into the background behind the psilocybin businesses and Measure 109. Then I'll delve more into the text amendments, and then we'll turn it over for public testimony. So the proposal, it adds new definitions for terms relating to psilocybin. It adds psilocybin service centers as a conditional use with site plan review to the following zones: Rural Service Center, commercial and mixed use; Terrebonne commercial; Tumalo commercial; Sun River commercial; Sun River Town Center, rural commercial. It adds psilocybin service centers to allowable uses in destination resorts. It adds psilocybin testing labs as a conditional use with site plan review to rural industrial zones and Tumalo industrial zones. And it adds a new chapter, creating time, place, and manner, otherwise known as TPM, criteria for psilocybin manufacture as a farm use, manufacture as a processing use, and I'll explain the difference later, and psilocybin service centers. And I'll delve into all of these a little bit more later. First, a little bit of background. In November 2020, voters approved ballot measure 109. This is what legalized psilocybin subject to the criteria in the measure in the state of Oregon. Cities and counties are automatically opted in. This is different from the marijuana program. You're in until you're out. This program begins on January 2nd, 2023. Measure 109 also allows cities and counties to send an opt-out ordinance for manufacturing and service centers to the electors, the voters, in the next general election, as we're all probably well aware.
So one note, just acknowledging that, remember, well, maybe you're getting to it right here.
Here it is.
Yeah, rural voters, just different, yeah, so.
Yeah, so this slide shows, so on November 8th, a couple of weeks ago, I guess it is now, this opt-out ordinance was overturned by the electors. And if you can read that, I'll read it out. The countywide vote was 56.53 to 43.47 in favor of overturning the opt-out. And I believe that's the most recent numbers. And it's a little bit different in the unincorporated county, meaning the rural county, which is what these amendments would affect, 52.96 to 47.04. So it is a little bit different. And just as a reminder, everything we're talking about today does not deal with cities. This is only in the unincorporated areas of Deschutes County. So the city of Bend is doing their own thing, Redmond's doing their own thing. This is just the rural county. Measure 109 also allows for the adoption of reasonable time, place, and manner, TPM regulations for psilocybin businesses. During deliberations for the initial opt-out, the board did express an interest in starting the TPM amendment process in case the opt-out was overturned. That would mean that a program would begin on January 2nd. As a result of this, staff created TPM amendments and held the first set of public hearings in front of the Planning Commission on September 29th and October 13th. And I'll go into their recommendations shortly. So just a brief note, what is this hearing for? This hearing is not about the opt-out or the November 8th vote or the general merits of psilocybin in terms of do we want it, do we not want it. That has been established. Deschutes County is going to have a psilocybin program. What shape that takes is what we are addressing. This hearing is addressing the land use regulations and the criteria that would go into effect in 2023. In other words, time, place, and manner within the context of the Oregon land use system. So in other words, obviously the testimony of the value of psilocybin is intrinsically tied to the zoning code. The more specific the testimony, the better in terms of, or the more helpful, I should say, in terms of what shape this might take, what it looks like on the ground, rather than just general kind of pros or cons. So to briefly go into the amendments in a little bit more detail. The definitions chapter, most of these came directly from ORS 475A, which is what Measure 109, the ballot measure, turned into in terms of law. The only significant thing to call out is we in the county separated out manufacture as a farm use from manufacture as a processing use. Oregon Health Authority, which is they're going to be regulating basically the majority of the psilocybin program. They have licenses for what they call manufacturing, but that's a very, very broad term. It includes manufacture, planting, cultivation, growing, harvesting, production, preparation, propagation, compounding, conversion, or processing. So in other words, it includes the growing as well as the processing. So for the purposes of our code, we separate it out to manufacture as a farm use and manufacture as a processing use. And hopefully this will be helpful to those who get licenses from OHA so they can tell exactly what rules will pertain to them. Am I going too fast?
I think you're fine.
Okay, good. All right, manufacture as a farm use. In the code, in the law, psilocybin producing fungi is considered a farm crop and a farm use, and therefore it is permitted outright in exclusive farm use zones. This comes directly from statute. One change that was a recommendation from the Planning Commission is to also permit manufacture as a farm use in forest zones. And I can explain the reasons for that later. Fungi must be grown indoors. That comes from the state. The setbacks from the underlying zone will apply in terms of where you can site your manufacture site. Separation distances are 1,000 feet from a school. It can be 500 feet if there's a natural barrier, such as a river, a mountain, highway, that type of thing. These came from the ORS regulations concerning service centers, but we have applied them to manufacturing as a farm use as well. Prohibitions, again, from state law. You cannot have a new dwelling in conjunction with psilocybin as a farm crop, and you cannot have a farm stand in conjunction with the fungi crop. Processing use. This may be carried on in conjunction with the manufacture as a farm use. So you can have processing piggybacking with your growing. This is subject to the standards in our Deschutes County Code 1816-025. That's been in place for a while. That allows the small scale processing of crops under a certain size. If it's under 10,000 square feet, you have to comply with all applicable siting standards. If it's really small, if it's less than 2,500 square feet, you're exempt from any applicable siting standards. Service centers, and this is the one that I think is drawing the most attention and the most interest. This is in the proposed code allowed as a conditional use with site plan review in zones that already allow medical clinics, medical centers, retail service businesses, that type of use. And this was done because the impacts are perceived, or the perceived impacts are similar or less than those uses that are already there. So in other words, it's not going to break that ceiling and create kind of impacts that are greater than, say, going to a medical clinic or a retail service business, even though we recognize the business does have some differences. But in terms of what you see from the outside, in terms of a car going there, staying there, then leaving, that type of thing, the impacts are supposed to be less than. Again, the setbacks from the underlying zone apply. Separation distances, also 1,000 feet, 500 if a natural barrier. The hours of operation for service centers, the recommendation from the Planning Commission was to make it 6 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. This is what the Oregon Health Authority recommends, or is in their law, excuse me. Initially, we had smaller or shorter hours, but the Planning Commission thought that it just made more sense, and a lot of testimony spoke to the fact that it just makes more sense to follow OHA, have everybody on the same page. The last recommendation from the Planning Commission is to allow service centers in the destination resort zone, and this is a change. And I'll go into that again later. Service centers in EFU and co-location, and this is a big thing that a lot of people have discussed. EFU zones, it's the most restrictive zone in state law, and that's by design. There is a clause in the ORS and the statute that states that the operation of a psilocybin service center may be carried on in conjunction with the psilocybin-producing fungi crop. After a lot of back and forth with the Department of Land Conservation and Development and the Department of Justice, and this was gone over a lot in the Planning Commission proceedings, they had an interpretation of this statute that service centers cannot be permitted as a standalone use on EFU land, but they did see two potential avenues by which you could have a service center as part of another use that's already allowed in EFU, specifically a home occupation or a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use. And each of those have their own code chapters, their own set of criteria for how you can qualify for that. But they identified these two doors as ways you could have service centers in EFU. So staff is going along with that recommendation and that interpretation for the purposes of this code. Testing labs, they're allowed as a conditional use with site plan review in 2 different industrial zones. We haven't actually heard much testimony concerning this. We don't anticipate it would be a super popular use. We don't know yet, but we're welcome to testimony. The rules are already in Oregon Administrative Rule, Section 333, 7010, and after that. So I'm going to go over the Planning Commission process. A lot of people here participated in that, and staff thinks that it was a really good process, personally. So the public hearing was held on September 29th and continued on to October 13th, and closed the record 1 day later. A lot of people testified. We had 32 people providing written testimony, about 24 in person over those 2 dates. I'll note that staff has not received any additional testimony after that process, so there's nothing to kind of pass on to the board. And again, the full record is available on the website, so you can look up anyone's comments and that type of thing. The majority of the testimony, and that's both written and verbal, supported psilocybin in general and felt that the current regulations that were proposed were too restrictive. And some highlights here are overnight and multi-day stays are considered critical to complete this therapeutic experience. Part of it is you have this intense experience that may last several hours, but in order to really, tie it up with a bow, you want to have what's called an integration session at the end to really, really see, talk about and process what you've gone through, because it is significant. And having multi-day stays are critical to that. So we heard that a lot. We also heard recommendations for the hours for service centers to match OHAs, a desire for rural and nature-based settings for service centers. This was really a significant amount of testimony focused on this. The place where you have the service center, where you have this experience, this administration session, it's really critical to the quality of the experience and the therapy that you're receiving. So that was a biggie. We also received recommendations to allow service centers in destination resorts and allowing manufacturing in forest zones in addition to EFU. Other testimony was, there was some against psilocybin in the rural county. A lot of them were addressing the opt-out rather than TPM, so it was just a general not in favor of psilocybin. I think now that that vote is behind us, it's a little more clear kind of what we're talking about in this specific hearing and what we're not. That said, there were also land use related concerns about rural compatibility, orderly growth, safety, water usage. Some people wanted to put psilocybin businesses in cities first and just see how that went. The recommendations, and I'll go through this pretty quick, is to allow manufacturing as a farm use and processing on forest zone properties in addition to farm. Statute states that a county may allow the manufacture of psilocybin products as a farm use on land zoned for farm or forest use in the same manner as the manufacture is allowed on EFU zones.
So one question about that, and this may be for testimony. Mushrooms grow at the base of the trees, so that's a natural place to grow mushrooms. But my point in this scenario, I have a hunch that there's a path, once mushrooms maybe production may be allowed here, maybe there's a path to service centers, because that's what really people want, a service center in the rural setting. So if anybody's here to testify or explain that to me, or have we processed that concept, that, because my understanding, production, somebody's garage is going to be enough production for a county possibly, whatever the scale is. So I can't imagine this is the only step to that. Oh, we've got a new garage full of mushrooms in this forest zone.
It depends on the interpretation. Right now we see, or DLCD saw, those 2 doors that I mentioned earlier, commercial.
So that would apply there also.
Kind of focused into EFU land, but I think testimony saying that they want other things would be super helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Another recommendation is changing the hours. I've kind of gone over that a bunch of times, so I'll stop on that one. Destination resorts. There were recommendations to amend the destination resort code to permit service centers in destination resorts. The testimony noted that it could potentially be an easier fit for those who had concerns about rural compatibility. The destination resort already has, you don't have as many residential neighbors or conflicts. It's already managed in this larger property, and it is in a natural setting. There's also existing overnight accommodations and ancillary uses in destination resorts, which were 2 things that people wanted to have available to them. It is unclear whether a destination resort could immediately apply for site plan review. There might be some modification to the master plan, and this would likely be sent to a hearings officer. But the Planning Commission did recommend proceeding with this if possible. Sorry, my Zoom is... recognizing that psilocybin service centers can be allowed as home occupations or commercial activities in conjunction with farm use. Again, these are the two doors, as I keep referring to, that could potentially allow service centers on EFU. Given this interpretation from DLCD, the Planning Commission recommended to not shut those doors. In theory, they could prohibit it, but they recommended to keep these doors open. This is not necessarily a recommendation, but we did receive some testimony saying that all of these regulations should be subject to a Goal 5 analysis, and that is in regards to wildlife area combining zones. Staff believes that this is not in fact the case for several reasons. Manufacturing is considered a farm use or a farm crop already, so it would not be subject to Goal 5 analysis. The areas where service centers are currently proposed in these kind of smaller retail commercial centers such as Tumalo and Terrebonne, they're not subject to the current wildlife area combining zone. Service centers through those two potential doors that I refer to a lot, those are not standalone uses themselves that you would have to run an analysis over. They kind of roll up into these existing uses, home occupations or commercial activity in conjunction with farm use. So for that reason, staff believes that a Goal 5 analysis is not required. And lastly, for destination resorts, they have their own separate analysis and their own process for analyzing what mitigation might be required for any wildlife impacts. And that's kind of baked into that master planning process. So it's separate from the typical Goal 5 analysis. Lastly, I think the Planning Commission recommended allowing overnight accommodations and ancillary uses as accessory uses. At the same time, they also know that this might not actually be possible within the confines of our state land use system. They acknowledge that there was a significant amount of testimony wanting these, and they understood the reasons behind it and supported it, that theory. Given the compressions of the timeline right now, as well as the limitations of the land use law, staff doesn't see an avenue for that right now, but the Planning Commission did want to make it very clear that if there's a way to do it, they do recommend proceeding with that. All right, and I'm almost done, I promise. This is just a very brief summary of where everything would be allowed. Manufacturing as a farm use and processing. EFU, F1, and F2, those are our two forest zones. Service centers. Rural commercial, rural service centers, Sun River Commercial, Sun River Town Center, Terrebonne Commercial, Tumalo Commercial, as well as destination resorts. Testing labs, rural industrial, and Tumalo Industrial. Excuse me. Here's a map, if you can see it, that just shows kind of where these things are. We showed this at the Planning Commission hearing. It obviously did not have the forest use yet. My screen shows the colors a little bit different, but you can see where the forest on the western side of the county is. So that would be a potential for manufacturing as a farm use and a processing use. All right, process and next steps. Options to move forward after the testimony is to continue the hearing to a date certain, close the hearing, leave the written record open to a date certain, close the hearing and set a date for deliberations, or close the hearing and commence deliberations. I'm not sure if now is the time to discuss the timing and the schedule, but should I note that we were originally planning on continuing this hearing today at 6 p.m., having after a break, 3 to 5, a break, then 6 p.m. There's been a last minute change, and the 6 p.m. segment does need to be rescheduled. And this, we will discuss what that actual date is. But here, staff does have some suggestions on ways to move forward. I don't know if we want to save that for after testimony to be able to get people to testify first, but we do have some potential.
Tanya, let's save that till after the testimony. I think that's important.
And just one quick note that it does, given the time crunch that needs to be adopted by the end of the year, the amendments will require emergency adoption, and that means that it must be unanimous. So just a note. So we can circle back to this after our testimony. And I don't know if the chair wants to speak of a hard stop at a certain time, or if we're going to just see how it goes, but I'll leave that up to the chair.
Okay.
So this is my contact information, and it's all on the website, and that's all I have. Thanks for bearing with me.
Tanya, thank you for thoroughly going through what's been happening and with the Planning Commission and the fact that, what is it, about 56 people, I'm sure some of those are duplicates, either in person or submitted testimony, which is part of the record, so we thank you for that. Right now, I only have 3 people that have signed up to testify at this moment, unless there's some people on Zoom. Stephanie, is there anyone on Zoom? Okay, all right. Okay, we will be having testimony, and some people will be submitting written documents as part of your testimony, and you will be given 3 minutes now for your testimony. I see that Corinne Selko is from Portland, if you wanted to testify first, and we do have the letter that you've submitted also. Thank you.
So much. I'll also just note if someone wants to, if we really want to expedite and people want to sit here and get ready for after Corinne, you may do that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Adair and members of the board. My name is Corinne Selko with Emerge Law Group, 621 Southwest Morrison Street, Suite 900 in Portland. I'm here on behalf of Juniper Preserve, formerly the Pronghorn Resort, which is a wellness-based resort community here in Deschutes County. And I'm here to talk about a rather narrow but important issue, and to encourage you to accept the Planning Commission recommendation to allow service centers in the destination resort zone. I want to just quickly remind the board about a few things about service centers. One is that a service center is the place where a client will consume, ingest, and experience the effects of psilocybin. And no psilocybin products may leave the service center, and the client is guided by a facilitator the entire time for that entire administrative session in the service center, and they're not allowed to leave until the facilitator deems them ready to do so. And so what you've heard from Ms. Saltzman and from the record before the Planning Commission is that the Planning Commission recommended to allow service centers in the destination resort zone based largely on a number of factors, one being how critical a nature-based, quiet setting is with no distractions, how critical a multi-day stay is to be able to have that administration session and then be able to sort of reintegrate back into life after the session and kind of therapeutically go over what experience you just had. And a destination resort kind of seems to be the ideal place from a land use perspective and your land use considerations. Destination resorts have already been master planned. They have already been deemed to have the infrastructure capacity, the utilities, the transportation access, all of the things. They have already been deemed to not be in a wildlife area. All those things that you might be concerned about, these areas have already been master planned and reviewed and approved. So we feel like these are kind of the ideal places to allow a service center. That's just one type, and one of the Planning Commission's ideas was that now that the voters have decided they want service centers in the community, let's give them options and access. And so this retreat model is one option. Furthermore, there's only 4 destination resorts in your county currently existing. And while it's true someone else could come and start their own destination resort and include in the master planning process the psilocybin service center, that is one path. What I want to talk to you about is these 4 existing destination resorts and the efficient way to allow them to have service centers. Service centers are a wellness-based, the Oregon Psilocybin Services Program is a wellness-based program. You don't need to have a medical diagnosis to participate. You don't need a medical degree or a medical license in order to become a facilitator. And so in existing destination resorts, in the places where those resorts have already been approved in their master plan for wellness-based services, whether it be a spa or a fitness center or some other wellness-based service, that would be the location where it should be allowed. And these existing resorts shouldn't have to go through modifying their conceptual or master plans in order to allow this use.
the use will already go through the site plan review process. They will already be required to comply with OHA rules, and they'll be required to comply with county TPMs, if you do something like hours of operation or something like that. So for those reasons, we ask you to adopt the Planning Commission recommendation to allow service centers in the destination resort zone, but with the specific adjustment in Exhibit A to my letter that allows for lawfully established destination resorts, that allows them to establish a psilocybin service center in an area approved for a spa, physical fitness center, or other use deemed by the planning director to enhance a person's wellness pursuant to an approved final master plan without going through the modification of a conceptual master plan or final master plan process.
Thank you, Corinne. You were just a bit over your 3 minutes, but and thank you for your letter, too.
Thank you
so much. All right, Jeannie Fraley?
Can I have 2 more, though, because I'm a fence rider here. So
Okay, Charles Bear.
Aren't we supposed to be able to show the 3-minute timer on the?
We do. It's up there on the screen, and it when it disappears, and I actually put my phone on, and so I knew she went over 1 minute 8 seconds.
Okay, hi, my name's Charles Bear. I'm from Redmond, Oregon. Thank you for giving me this time to speak.
Go ahead, Charles.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm for psilocybin legalization, and I think the voters of Deschutes County have stated on numerous occasions that they support the legalization of psilocybin mushrooms, and I think they'd like to see it fast-tracked. I think that we all saw what a success it was to legalize marijuana, so I think that's a good path for us to take on legalizing psilocybin. And I think that I'd like to see more of a roadmap on when we can expect to be able to grow it ourselves and sell it ourselves. I'd like to see more discussion on that and more of a roadmap on that. And I'd also like to advocate for the legalization of peyote. And I'd also like to say that we should also be focusing on once marijuana is federally legal and once psilocybin is legal in the state, how we'd be able to sell that statewide and nationwide, and even on an international level, how we'd be able to sell that online and manufacture it and stuff like that. So thank you very much.
Just to, kind of comment on a couple of your requests or questions. I mean, we are working on implementing Measure 109 here, and Measure 109 does not provide opportunities for individual or personal production, retail sales. The Measure 109 allows for production in, authorized manufacturing production facilities, and then consumption with a facilitator in place in authorized service centers, so that we're not going to be able to get at some of the things that you were asking about with these time, place, and manner rules.
Thank you. Jeannie.
Thank you for having us, commissioners. This has really been very educational for me today. So, number one, I've been here the whole time. I got here at 1 o'clock, and I've been listening to a lot of things, and it's been very educational. So we talked about gambling, gaming addictions that can lead to drug addictions. We talked about mental health facilities that we need more here to treat people with drug addictions. And now I just find it kind of odd that now we're talking about legalizing yet another drug. So, and I know a lot of people in this room have never tried Liberty Caps, magic mushrooms, whatever the heck you want to call them, right? So I'm a child from the 60s and 70s, and yes, I have tried them, and not such a great experience. So, and I don't know.
You're testifying to the board, yeah.
So anyway, yes, and I'm also one of the major spokespeople for Tumalo. And the Tumalo residents do not want anything like this in Tumalo. We do not want a dispensary. We don't want a service center or anything like that right down in Tumalo. I'm not sure where the area that they're talking about as the industrial area of Tumalo. Is that by Knife River? Do you guys know? I'm not sure what they're talking about for industrial Tumalo.
I don't know.
Does anybody know?
We can look into that.
We'll get back to you.
Okay, perfect,
Not
perfect.
industrial areas that are in discussion. It's commercial zoned property.
Okay, and then my other big question is, why are we looking at the unincorporated areas and not the incorporated towns like Sisters and?
They have their own, Jeannie, they have their own
They
rules.
did their own.
Okay.
Right, so we are just with unincorporated Deschutes County is all that we are concerned with. Ben will make their rules up, and Sisters will make their rules up, and I believe Redmond opted out.
Okay, so, I mean, that could be something that Tumalo, which I've spoke to some of you before about incorporating, that might be a good idea for Tumalo to do, because I'm feeling like things get thrown on us there that people don't want. The residents don't want it there. It's, but it just gets like, there you go, you're unincorporated, there you go, you're stuck with it. And it's interesting listening to people and, their reasons and things for wanting it. And I totally understand, well, it makes me feel a little bit better, the fact that we're not going to be able to grow it and sell it and things like that legally, just like on the street type of thing. And let's see, what was my other thing? Another concern is the fact that there are no doctors monitoring this at all. It's just something that people can call up and say, hey, can I get a reservation for Saturday night, and come and spend the night? I mean, I don't know. What is that going to look like? So that's another concern of mine, I guess I could say. So I just feel like it should be something that should go through a medical doctor. And if you have a diagnosis and if they feel like this is something that may help you, then yeah, we'll try it. I don't feel like the clinical trials have been long enough to really get any good data from what I've researched. But, that's not what we're here today for. So, thank you.
No, thank you for testifying, and thank you for spending the afternoon with us.
Oh, it was good. Thank
No, it's a fascinating life.
One thought, Jeannie, exploring the idea of incorporating Tumalo to have more local control of your own future. That's something that Tumalo should be considering for a lot of reasons. On this particular issue, you might want to wait until all of the data from Measure 9152 is available from the clerk's office, and checked what the precincts that cover Tumalo, how they voted. Because at first look right now, not every single ballot has been counted yet, but the precincts of the county that are unincorporated, 16 out of 24 of them voted against the opt-out. So if Tumalo is one of those, you could explore incorporating Tumalo, but it may be possible that the people of Tumalo actually are in favor.
Right down in the Tumalo town area,
Yeah.
so there's about,
No.
what did we figure about?
600 and some?
The precincts are not very big, so I don't know off the top of my head what the precincts the precinct or precincts are and what their boundaries are, but they're not huge areas. So there's.
Yeah, that would be super interesting. So I'll do that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. I don't have any more blue sheets from the room. Stephanie, has anyone on Zoom raised their hand? And did we have any phone calls? We didn't go over phone calls. No phone calls. Okay, all right. So we do have two more people that are going to speak then. Thank you, Brenda. Thanks. Okay. Piper Lucas, do you want to come up?
Hello again. My name is Piper Lucas, and I live at 65729 Old Bend Redmond Highway. And I'm a resident in the unincorporated county, and I have been around multiple counties in the state, informing, educating around TPMs and what's possible, and answering any questions. So some of the biggest issues that have come up really is equity. And so with Corinne, destination resorts are wonderful to have as psilocybin service centers. And like she mentioned, there's only 4 in our county. So we know that rural residents voted for this, and to only allow them in destination resorts basically means out-of-town people can afford that. So some of our people in rural Deschutes can't afford to go to Pronghorn or Eagle Crest. I don't even know if Eagle Crest wants to do it, but just as an example, to listen to your voters that want to have rural services, having another option for an affordable way is something to consider. So Tanya spoke about EFU and forest zones, EFU specifically in conjunction with a farm use. So the way that OHA's rules are coming out is that it's $10,000 a year to have a service center. It's also an additional $10,000 a year to be a manufacturer. So all of a sudden, if you have an EFU property and you want to offer nature-based retreat centers, then you have to become a manufacturer and a service center. So that's looking at $20,000 a year in fees. All of a sudden, the price of psilocybin services, if you want a nature-based service, is getting to be more expensive for clients. And you guys missed a lot of the testimony for Planning Commission, but there's a lot of facts saying that nature-based experiences have a higher efficacy for them working. And I will provide written testimony to you guys for some websites that testify to that. Tony, thanks for the plug for forest use. I think it would be wonderful to allow service centers and forest use. With a home occupation would be a great way to do it. Right now we don't have it written, but it would be wonderful to have it as an option. Another thing I want to bring to your attention is that not too many of these things are expected to open in 2023. We're expecting 12 to 20 statewide. That's it. And so it's becoming the opposite conversation for people is how are we going to open enough of these so that we can even train facilitators? So instead of placing a lot of restrictions that limit people that want to open these things, certain counties are not providing any TPMs because OHA and DLCD, as we know, are already super, super strict. So just allowing them to move forward without TPMs, you're not going to get a giant flood of people wanting to open these service centers. So my time's up.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Piper. Mike.
Hello. Thank you, Board of Commissioners. My name is Mike Hayes, 17905 Cascade Estates Drive. Real quickly, I just wanted the board to remember sometimes when we're talking about these subjects, these very sensitive subjects, we want to put rules in place that pigeonhole us into a corner that really don't allow us to function. I'm speaking as a veteran. I'm speaking as a cannabis retailer. I can tell you this is not the same thing. So as a veteran and the veterans I employ, they will not go to Pronghorn. They will not go to the city because of the trauma they've experienced is not something that is conducive for them. So they need a natural setting to do that. This is not a moneymaker. As Piper just pointed out, it's $20,000 a year just to operate, which is just the baseline. So just as emotionally charged as this can be, being a resident of 50 years, and we're talking about something that's been taboo for a long time, just understand that the end result of your decision could have lasting effect on people that really need therapy in a setting that could ultimately change their lives and the people around them. So just take that to heart when you're thinking about this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for your service, too.
Welcome.
Alex DeSantos?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Alex Dos Santos. I'm a cannabis licensing and compliance specialist. My address is 61363 Frank Lane here in Bend. I just wanted to address an issue with allowing psilocybin service centers at the destination resorts here. Seems to be a problem here at the destination resorts. The one main issue is having that outdoor setting. I think it should be super limited because in those destination resorts, there's guests, there's tourism, there's homeowners in those resorts. So having that limited just to a small indoor facility, because how else would you be able to keep track of people on a facilitator session walking around that whole destination resort? So I just wanted to give a suggestion to limit that access to any sort of outdoor recreational activities for these facilitator sessions into a more of a confined space where it doesn't cause any problems with the surrounding neighborhood in those communities. Thanks.
Question. You said licensing specialist. You work for the state?
No, I do licensing around the country, a lot of it in California, a lot of it in Oregon. Well, not so much in Oregon since
So
the
a consultant for company people that want to be in business.
Yes, I do all their operating procedures, all that really fun stuff.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Jessica Carroll?
Hi, my name is Jessica, and I'm a local here, and I've met a few of you in person before, and I'm here on behalf of just being a community member. I'm here on behalf of veterans. I'm here on behalf of members who are struggling with anxiety, depression, emotional traumas, mental health within our community. And I'm also here to try and help hold you guys accountable for listening to the voice of the people and just taking really what we have to say into consideration, especially those of us who have used this as medicine in dealing with a lot of those things I've mentioned. If you guys haven't, I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet. I would also encourage you guys to please go back and listen to community involvement of what I said on past videos, because that would take some of the time here that I don't want to just be reiterating myself to you guys. So please go back and do that if you haven't yet. Let's see. I am here because of these TPMs, and I think the way that we're rolling them out and the rural area setting for people to have that in this process of the journey through these emotions that people are dealing with when dealing with this kind of medicine. As a local here, I want to have access to this in that kind of setting. I also would love to provide something like that, but as you've heard from other testimony, it's getting expensive, and there's a lot of good for this. And I've said this to the board, and I don't mean disrespect if I say it now, but I feel like some of this people are living in fear over, and if that's the case for what you think this is, I suggest you take the medicine and see how that leads you. And I just encourage that as well for everyone. Nobody comes unscathed from trauma and things they've dealt with. So it can be benefit to all. There's so much evidence behind this in a lot of different ways within the VA and a lot of different avenues that you can look up by our friendly search on Google. Let's see, there's other states that are rolling this out, Texas, Colorado. I think that we are on the front of a huge thing nationwide, and we get to be the leaders in this. And us as a community, also being, as you've said, we have 4 destination places here locally. Obviously, we are a destination place, so we know we're going to get an influx of people from out of state. So how can we have this not just within specific kind of settings? Let me see, I'm going to try and wrap this up. And yeah, I also wanted to just mention, I've also been to some of the meetings locally through Deschutes County on, what's to come for our area in the next till 2040. You know, these meetings of what does our future look like here? And one of those things is commerce and bringing community together. And me as a local, I'm an entrepreneur and I want to be able to bring amazing things to our community. And I just want to be able to work with you guys in doing that and not having more roadblocks for us as locals to try and, you know, make this the best it could be. So I'll try and end on that. And thank you for your time. And I look forward to having further conversations with all of you.
Thank you, Jessica, for ending on that positive note.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Stephanie, has anyone else raised their hand in the meantime? No? Okay. Tanya? Should we end the public hearing, the testimony at this time then, and let's figure out our dates? No one else?
Two things I wanted to say. Number one, we publicly advertised that this hearing was going to continue at 6 p.m. And I'm not sure if anyone's going to be showing up, but to make sure that nobody shows up and has no one to talk to, I will make sure to be back here at 6 p.m. To talk to anyone who happens to be out. And Tanya will be here too.
Okay, thank you.
I'm disappointed that we had that on our calendar for several weeks, and now we're pulling back that public participation opportunity from the community.
Well, let's acknowledge, I mean, there's no, I didn't see the conflict on my calendar, so that's one commissioner. So who are you disappointed in?
I was aware that this was set for tonight for at least 3 or 4 weeks.
Well, so you're disappointed in your fellow commissioners.
Well, no, I guess.
Don't just imply it, please. I mean, I take responsibility for it, and thank you for letting me know you're disappointed.
Okay. The other thing I wanted.
Tanya, we did try and, do we need to set it up at a night next week on the 28th or in the afternoon?
It's up to the board and how.
Okay. All right. I know that we did the night before for psilocybin for the testimony, and we had a few people, maybe, 5 people or something that night. It wasn't,
The opt-out hearing, yeah.
Yeah, the opt-out hearing. It was, I would have thought it would have been more, and it really wasn't. So, I apologize, but if we could put it back on our agenda for next Monday, does that work? What kind of day do we have that day? On the 28th?
During the meeting.
Mm-hmm, during the meeting, like now.
I don't think we've seen the agenda requests. They're due to tomorrow, so I don't know if we've received
Okay,
any
we'll
of those.
know on Wednesday then. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so Tanya.
So the other
Whitney?
thing
Stephanie?
No.
You have a raised hand now. Shirley, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I can only see MCS.
Hello?
Yes, you have, yes, thank you so much for joining us. You do have 3 minutes for testimony. Let's see,
Okay, yeah, I
And
just wanted to echo the importance.
if you can identify yourself and your mailing address, please, that would be lovely.
Yes, my name is Melissa Sanchez, and the address is 19610 Apache Road, Bend, Oregon, 97702.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly.
So go ahead, Melissa, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge the importance of allowing service centers within the destination resorts area and also the rural county with the successful vote no allowed for unincorporated area to be used. And I think that it's important that as many service centers that can functionally come out into the county be allowed to do so. I think that, as you guys have heard various times, the community really desires psilocybin treatment, and access to it is fundamentally important to mental health. I think that allowing extremely restrictive time, place, manner ordinances is completely.
Okay, do we have a technical difficulty again? Melissa?
Ailments.
Okay.
In the within so long to have access to this medicine, to this treatment that can change lives and save lives. So yeah, I just wanted to echo that.
Okay, thank you. Is that your total comment then today?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us via Zoom.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you. Okay, so Tanya, back to you.
Yeah, so I think a few options. So if the board would like to continue the hearing to a date certain, we do need to set that date.
Okay.
Now. So that would be the first step, and then figuring out the written record and how that corresponds. I can share my screen and show some options, if that's helpful, for kind of
Right.
what we drew up this.
And we have to make sure that, yes, we do have 3 commissioners when we do vote, and because it does have to be passed by emergency.
So what's happening here is, I found out I'm going to something tonight, and Commissioner Adair did too, and that's what we heard through the staff. It's like, oh, we didn't have a quorum for 6 o'clock tonight. So that's how this happened.
So if I may just go through this concept of continuing the public hearing to next Monday, the 28th. The board could set a certain time, whether that meeting usually starts at 1, so it could start off right at 1 or be some other time, up to you, of course. I believe that evening is unavailable, so it would probably have to be during the day. We could then leave the record open until 4 p.m. on December 2nd, so that's that same Friday, so giving, about another business week for written testimony. The following week is unavailable for deliberations, but staff proposes having deliberations and potential first and second reading for emergency adoption on December 14th, which is a Wednesday. It does need to be adopted unanimously because it does need to be adopted by emergency, which puts it into effect essentially immediately or sometimes within 30 days. If it's a non-emergency, it takes 90 days. So that is why there's a time crunch. So that does leave December 21st as a little bit of wiggle room if there is kind of a extended deliberation or some extenuating circumstances. So that's our suggestion. Of course, open to anything.
You mean like a blizzard?
Like a blizzard.
Yes. So let's set it. I know. Let's set it up for the 14th. I mean, some people have 6 feet of snow, right? The East Coast does. So let's set it up for the 14th. If we have the written record closing on December 2nd at 4, that seems to be plenty of time. And then if we do next Monday, you had said earlier maybe if we did it at 1. So if someone wanted to testify, they could come in on their at lunch hour and testify. If we did it 1 o'clock promptly, would that work out? Okay.
And these are full legislative amendments, so we can communicate with people on this also. So, I mean, if there's something that, I'm available.
Well, and Chair, if I can just ask the question, December 14th assumes emergency ordinance, but emergency adoption, but we can't predetermine how the board's going to vote. So if that's not the case, then the 14th and then the first meeting would be in January, and then the ordinance would take effect 90 days later. Is that
That's what
correct?
Would happen, and then that
I just
a limbo of that first before it's effective. Then
Mm-hmm.
a weird limbo. It is possible to do that, but it will complicate things.
Okay, I just want to be clear, because we can't, as
Well,
staff, we can't predetermine how the board's going to vote on the ordinance, so just so we know what the options are.
Right. Thank you so much. Stephanie?
There's probably other jurisdictions in the same situation.
Could be.
And, you know, I mean, we're trying to honor in that first date of the next year, but maybe there'll be a slide in the window. I don't know. And I don't know what that means, OHA or who would do that, but.
When I said I had two things I wanted to talk about, that was
great.
actually the second thing was other jurisdictions. So I had a chance to talk to a couple of the commissioners from Hood River County while we were at AOC last week. And one of the interesting things I learned from them was that they were toying with the idea of restricting the number of facilitators per facility, per service center. And in so doing, they could essentially guarantee a small-scale operation. You all may recall that when we first started talking about this, I was asking about whether we could do spatial restrictions, you know, whether we could say, hey, this can only be, 15,000 square feet or smaller. And staff informed me that we are not allowed to do that. But in Hood River County, they seem to have identified this pathway to kind of guaranteeing, more modest, low-profile scale service centers, or specifically service centers, by capping the number of facilitators that can be working at any point in time. I thought this was pretty interesting because if we could guarantee that a service center was a pretty modest scale operation, pretty low-key, low-profile, then I would just believe that a lot of the concerns that we have about them would be lower, and we might be willing to be a little bit more broad-minded on where they could go if we could guarantee that they were smaller scale operations. So I wanted to throw that into the mix of discussion and ask if staff could do a little bit of research on what they're doing, the approach that they're taking in Hood River County and that specific issue.
In fact.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. I did speak to Eric Walker today, Hood River Planning Director, and they are going through second reading tonight. Their amendments as it pertains to psilocybin service centers, they're applying it to rural commercial zones and to EFU only. As I understand it, for exclusive farm use, it's going to be highly restrictive as it pertains to time, place, and manner. So they are respectfully disagreeing with the Department of Land Conservation and Development's letter into the record, which is interpreting the state law as it pertains to land use, that psilocybin service centers in the exclusive farm use zone can only be incidental and subordinate as a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use, as Tanya noted in her PowerPoint presentation. Hood River interprets ORS 475A in a way that ties service centers with production. And they are, with that interpretation, again, which is not in alignment with our current amendments, service centers would be a conditional use permit. They would be limited to 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. They would be allowed, they have to be established in the same building as production. That production, it has to be the lesser of either, they can only use 50% of the building or 800 square feet, the lesser of the two. They are only allowing 4 facilitated sessions at any one time. And they are precluding any type of overnight accommodation, commercial kitchen. Again, their approach is to establish stringent, and I think they're far more stringent than what is currently proposed by staff, time, place, and manner as it pertains to the exclusive farm use zone.
Okay, so Peter, after tonight, then maybe we could just see what they've, what you're saying, 8 to 5, limited, okay. So they've definitely got in a different direction. But Stephanie, you wanted to say something earlier.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners Chang and Bone. Stephanie Marshall, Assistant Legal Counsel. My coming up to this table was to address the question of continuing the public hearing, and that led me to question whether the notice for today was specific to both the 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. Today, and if so, it sounds like what I heard this afternoon was that 6 p.m. continuing to 6 p.m. next Monday was not an option. So just trying to get, make sure that the notice and then the opportunities for public testimony were consistent. So that was really a question, and also just kind of making sure that we haven't given notice on something that won't be provided. I do understand that both Tanya and Commissioner Chang will be here tonight at 6 to let anybody that shows up know that the 6 p.m. time is not available. But, kind of circling back to the continuation of public testimony to next Monday and what that looks like.
So are you saying then that we should have it at 6 p.m. then, maybe on the 29th?
If that's possible, yes.
That would be better.
That would be
much better.
Yes.
28th.
We can't do it on the 28th. I don't believe Commissioner Chang can do it on the 28th. So what about on the 29th? I think we're supposed to have a lot of snow that day, aren't we?
I don't believe I don't believe a hearings officer proceeding is scheduled for that date. And let me just take a moment and look at the Barnes and Sawyer schedule. I think it's I don't think,
I'm not available on the 29th.
For next.
I'm not available on the evening of the 29th.
Okay, so not the 29th. Okay, then what about November 30th? Because we're still accepting written testimony until December 2nd. So what about, we have our meeting on the 30th that starts at 9, and what if we have the public hearing that night on the 30th? Would that work? Are you okay on that night? You're okay? Are you okay, Commissioner Chang?
I would really prefer not to do the night of the 30th. I like I said, tonight has been on my calendar for several weeks, and it's really hard for me, I have school-age children in my house. It's really hard for me to readjust at the last minute to things that have not been scheduled.
Well, as someone who's been a commissioner for 4 years, and I don't believe I've ever had to make this change, I have to make this change. So, whatever. Can we do it with 2 people then? If we do it go back to the 28th and do it that night?
If it has to be that week, then the 30th would be the best date for me.
Okay, then let's go to the 30th. It's called November 30th.
November 30th.
At 6 p.m.
At 6 p.m.
I was worried about that, Stephanie. Thank you for pointing that out. I really felt like, there are people out there that's the time that's going to work for them.
Right.
And I apologize for tonight, but you know what? After 4 years, things happen.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got it for the 30th then at 6 p.m.
So to sum up, yeah, the public hearing will be continued to Wednesday, November 30th at 6 p.m. Same time, same channel. And then the public record, the written record, will stay open until December 2nd, which is a couple days later at 4 p.m. And many people have probably heard our spiel, but if you're going to submit something written, don't submit it at 3:59 p.m. because the internet is weird and sometimes it doesn't make it to us. We did have that happen in our planning commission hearing. We got something at like 4:02 and we couldn't accept it. So please just be mindful of that for if you're going to be sending written correspondence to me via email.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our disclaimer. So,
All right. Thank you so much.
thank you.
All right. With that, then we will now go on to other items.
So just to be real clear, that oral public hearing will be on November 30th at 6 o'clock. Continued this hearing to 6 o'clock on the 30th.
Yes.
You can try from the back of the room. She's got a question. Oh, you can write, you can
No,
send
or
a.
you can send us written, or you can come back in, Jessica, whatever you need to do. Thank you. All right. Any other items?
So I'm planning on a couple things. I'm planning on going to the Roosevelt landfill, which is in Washington, and according to our procedures, is acknowledging out-of-state travel. So I'm just letting you know. So I'm going to go see the renewable gas facility up there at a large regional landfill on Wednesday this week.
So will you be at our meeting then? No, we don't have one. do we?
Oh, wait a minute. I scheduled it because we don't have a meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I hope we don't. Yeah.
Okay, what am I going to be doing? That's right. I'm going to be meeting with Nick on Wednesday. All right. Commissioner Chang, did you have anything?
Nope.
All right. So do we have an executive then? Christie's here?
We do.
Christie, I know you gave us something. So we do need to take a brief adjournment so that we can have an executive session now, if you wouldn't mind.